The curse of Crystal Cove is one that looms over the town and is responsible for the many strange occurrences that happens to the townsfolk. It is responsible for the paranormal and unexplainable historical events that plague the town every so often, but more importantly, the bone-chilling disappearances of every mystery-solving team that has ever tried to investigate or look for the treasure that surrounds it. Thinking about that treasure, it's cursed our whole lives, ruined everything we ever were.
Them, the kids who disappeared. Crystal Cove Hive's Mystery Solvers Club. Mystery Incorporated.
What? These kids were just like us. Well, their name is named that way. Hazel Williams. I'm one of the original members of Mystery Incorporated that disappeared.
Don't give up. This has all happened before.
Why are you
Hello,
being
my name is
mean?
Prosper, and today I'll be explaining the origins of the curse of Crystal Cove, where it came from, how it came to be, and the mysterious entity that surrounds it.
So, Bob has been soon recruited, which means hunters of secrets.
In Yucatan, a group of 4 Mayans called the Hunters of Secrets and their pet jaguar encountered an entity bound inside a crystal sarcophagus. The entity inside the sarcophagus tried to manipulate the Hunters of Secrets to release it from its prison. However, the hunters realized that the entity was evil, and they tried to
Hello.
destroy it with the heart of a jaguar, a spear made of a unique stone. But they were interrupted by Spanish conquistadors who took the sarcophagus thinking it to be a great treasure, preventing the evil from being destroyed. The Hunters of Secrets were the original group of mystery solvers to be manipulated by the entity, and they wouldn't be the last.
Undertaking decided to find this great treasure.
Hi.
And after several months of searching, finally we did.
After the conquistadors found the sarcophagus, they took it aboard their ship, thinking they had found a great treasure. The captain of the ship, the Santa Luisa, was Fernando Aguirre, who had led the search for the crystal sarcophagus as he had heard great tales about it and had been searching for it for years. While on board, Captain Aguirre wrote a ship manifest. In his manifest, he detailed that after his crew took the sarcophagus aboard the ship, they realized that something was alive inside it, an entity of some sort, and that entity was evil. In a short time, the entity drove them to commit evil, influencing them to steal, pillage, and destroy. Only after much destruction did the conquistadors realize what they had done. They came to their senses and set out to get rid of the sarcophagus. Captain Aguirre ordered his crew to take the ship somewhere far. After sailing as far as they could, their ship washed ashore on an undiscovered cove in 1630, which they named Crystal Cove, a town that would later come to harbor the curse. Captain Aguirre buried the sarcophagus deep beneath Crystal Cove, along with any treasure that he had amassed from previous adventures, and as an extra precaution, he hid the map he had used to find the sarcophagus. The map he had used was a planispheric disc, a disc that
Hi.
could be divided into 6 parts and that could point to any location in the world. To ensure that nobody could ever get their hands on the disc and risk freeing the entity, Captain
Thank
Aguirre
you.
broke the disc into 6 pieces and gave the pieces to his crewmates, with the exception of one, which he kept for himself. He took his piece and concealed it in his ship, and then he hid his ship on top of a mountain where no one would be able to find it. After he and his crewmates separated, nearly all of them disappeared without a trace, thus setting in motion the curse of Crystal Cove.
Beware. Maybe your home is coming. This has all happened before. It begins with the unknown.
In
Hi.
1765, the curse would be dredged up by a group of Spanish missionaries who established the first town in Crystal Cove, years after the conquistadors had disappeared.
I'm not sure. I
Missionaries
just
would
haven't
not
have
only
a
encounter
copy
the
yet.
entity, but they would also uncover pieces of the planispheric disc.
Oh yeah,
The
I went
missionaries
to
had
the thrift
consistently
store this
hired
weekend. Look
Gabriel
what I
Serra,
found.
his 3 friends of mystery solvers, and their donkey
Somebody,
Porto,
like, I
encountered a
guess,
conquistador one day.
did
A
a shirt.
conquistador that had been a part of the crew that had
Is
disappeared
someone's
all those years
name's in
ago.
the
He told them a
back.
tale of great
Can you see
evil that they
that?
had found in Yucatan and
It's
brought to
written.
Crystal Cove. He
I was
couldn't
like,
finish the
oh,
story
a
before his madness got
memory.
the best of him, and he
Because
vanished
I
into
feel
the
bad
night,
when people
leaving
donate stuff
behind
like that,
two
so I
pieces
took
of
it.
the planispheric disc. The friars quickly became obsessed with the 2 pieces of the disc, soon realizing there was an evil surrounding it, the evil being the crystal sarcophagus beneath the town that had latched onto
I'm
the
waiting
disc.
for my coffee.
The friars tried to destroy it, but the entity wouldn't allow them. The entity then manipulated their donkey, Porto, who had influenced them to
No.
destroy the town. Porto set
What
out
do
to
you
destroy
mean?
the town with gunpowder barrels, but the friars tried to stop him. As they did, Porto stole one piece of the 2 discs and ran away into an alligator-infested swamp that was on the outskirts of town. Friar Gabriel chased him, however Porto was dragged away by piece was lost at the bottom of the ocean, along with half of Crystal Cove, after Porter had blown it up. No longer under the spell of the disc, Friar Gabriel hid his piece in a barrel of cheese. He and the other friars disappeared soon after, just as the conquistadors had before. After the friars disappeared, pattern would begin of 4 members in a group of mystery solvers, along with their animal companion, disappearing after investigating the curse of Crystal Cove.
Good morning.
Missionaries would be the first, and then be followed by the Alianza Mysteria, a group of mystery solvers and their pet Spun. Afterwards, it was the Mystery Gang with their pet bull Tiny. These groups of 4 members and their talking animal friend would all take an interest in either the curse or the treasure rumored to be buried under Crystal Cove, unaware, however, of what really lay below the town.
Oswald Burlington had a mystery solving gang, just like Mystery Incorporated. Although he called
I
it
showered.
the Lodge of Mystery.
You
The
bitch.
curse would continue in the 1880s when another gang of mystery solvers stumbled across the mystery that surrounded Crystal
You know,
Cove.
God forbid
Wolfie
I
Burlington,
wake up and
as a
look
mystery
like
solver
what I
known
wake
as
up
Rabbit, the benevolent
as.
Lodge of Mystery, would investigate the strange disappearances of the friars who set up the first
Someone said I
gang
smelled like
legends
shit.
behind the Spanish conquistadors. But they too would disappear whilst in search of the curse, with the only surviving member of the group being Abigail Peak. Abigail would continue her search with the help of a new talking animal companion by the name of Professor Pericles, who she met in
Why are you being a bully?
With the help of Professor Pericles, she
It's not nice. It's not funny.
underwater when Porter the donkey had blown up a portion of the town. For the rest of her life, Abigail continued looking for the piece
Hi,
underwater.
everyone.
She built a lab on the sea floor and designed robots that would aid in her search for the disc. Abigail would spend her entire life searching for the disc, but would die before ever laying eyes on it.
No, because everyone in my house is asleep.
Mystery solvers many years later, but this time it was the family, the Darrow family, better known as the Mystery Fellowship. The family became absorbed with the idea of a treasure being buried under Crystal Cove, who were now looking for. They would find a piece of the disc, but it would corrupt them and make them turn against one another. On Halloween night, as the family fought over the disc they had found, an earthquake began as they were in their mansion. The ground opened up and the mansion began to sink underground with the Darrow family inside, but they barely noticed that they continued to fight over the disc. The Darrow family were trapped underground with no one knowing where they were, and their disappearance was labeled as another part of the curse of Crystal Cove.
Of course not, you moronic fuck. Oh yeah, everyone in my house is asleep and they have jobs and schools. I'm gonna scream like a nutcase. That seems like a good, sensible idea, and totally not like I'm going to get my fucking shit beat.
Groups of 4 with an animal companion. Mystery Incorporated included Brad Charles and Judy Reeves. Ricky
Oh
Owens
yes,
and Cassie
because
Williams.
we all have the thought of I should scream while everyone else is very much asleep. That seems like a really good idea.
But Mystery Incorporated weren't the only ones interested in the curse at the time. Frederick Sr., a young man who had
He's
heard about
annoying
the
me.
Crystal Cove, came to the town in search of its
He
riches.
can have another
He had
chance
more
tomorrow.
interest in
And if he does that
rumored
again,
town than the
he's
actual
gone
curse.
forever.
Fred Jones Sr. would begin his search while studying at Darrow University in the history department, which gave him access to the town archives. By day, he would look through archives in the library for details that could lead him to the treasure, and by night, he would also continue his search, but in disguise as the freak of Crystal Cove. Through extensive research, he was able to find out about the planispheric disc. However, he wasn't able to find anything else. That was until Mystery Incorporated walked into the library and
Hi everyone.
for help. The group had found a drawing of the planispheric disc that they had no idea that they had stumbled across, but their mascot, Professor Pericles, did. Pericles and Fred Jones Sr., both having a mutual interest in the treasure and being the only two who really knew what they were looking for, began to work together behind the backs of Mystery Incorporated to find the pieces of the disc. One day, when searching in the cave to Crystal Cove beneath the Spanish church, Mystery Incorporated would find a piece of the disc. However, Frederick Sr., dressed as the freak of Crystal Cove, would ambush the children and force them to give him the piece. He then threatened them, forcing them to disappear without telling anyone, or something bad would happen to their loved ones. After forcing the children to disappear, Fred Jones then double-crossed Professor Pericles and framed him for their disappearances. This led to Professor Pericles being arrested, and Fred Jones would keep the piece of the disc as well as the drawing that Mystery Incorporated had found. But years later, Brad Charles and Judy Reeves would try to return to Crystal Crystal Cove after marrying and having a little baby boy. Frederick Sr. saw this as a threat and kidnapped the baby boy. He told the couple that their boy would not be harmed if they stayed away. Brad and Judy were forced to leave once again, and Frederick Sr. would raise the son as his own. The teenagers were never found by their families, and their disappearance was blamed once again on the curse of Crystal Cove. Years later, another group of teenage mystery solvers, Velma, Shaggy, Scooby-Doo, Daphne, and Fred Jones Jr., would discover a locket that contained a picture of the original Mystery Incorporated and would breathe life into the curse once again. But this time, they would be the ones to end it. Now that I have explained the curse, I will try to explain the evil entity inside the sarcophagus. According to the law of Mystery Incorporated, the entity inside the sarcophagus is a sentient inhabitant called the Anunnaki of Sumerian myth that comes from the planet Nibiru, the planet Nibiru being of Babylonian astronomy. According to legend, every 3,600 years, Nibiru passes by the Earth, and the veil between the Anunnaki world and the human world is so thin that they are able to interact with one another. Though they are able to interact with each other, the Anunnaki have to inhabit an animal body to be able to speak. Throughout history, the Anunnaki have helped humans, but not all of them are good. The entity inside the sarcophagus is an unnamed evil Anunnaki who manipulates those who seek him, promising them power, wealth, and riches in return of being released. But it is clear that if released, he would wreak havoc on the world. Thank you for watching. In my next video, I'll be going over the curse after the disappearance of Mystery Inc., and I'll be summarizing the events of Season 1 and Season 2 of Mystery Incorporated. That video will be a continuation of this one and will detail the current mystery gang's journey to uncover the truth about what really lies beneath Crystal Cove. The town of Crystal Cove is home to many strange and curious things. It's home to the infamous mystery gang who call themselves Mystery Incorporated. They are a group of teenagers dedicated to investigating and solving the strange and paranormal occurrences in their town, which usually are fake. Crystal Cove is also home to a rumored treasure and a terrifying curse, a curse that is embedded in the
I
very
burnt the
lives of all those who
ever-loving
reside
shit
in
out of
Crystal
myself,
Cove.
so I will be back.
You have to believe me. The curse will destroy you just like it destroyed my friends.
I found a thing called a mysterious artifact, a key to finding the great cursed treasure rumored to lie beneath Crystal Cove.
Hello and welcome to the second part of the Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated Timeline Explained. Today I will be elaborating on the curse of Crystal Cove and diving deeper into the lore of the show. This timeline will catalog the journey of the new Mystery Incorporated through Season 1 and Season 2 in a chronological order, where the episodes will be summarized for the sake of clarity and continuity. This video is a continuation of the first part, but you don't need to watch the first part to understand this one. Now, with that out of the way, let's begin our journey to understand the curse of Crystal Cove. The Curse of Crystal Cove is first mentioned in Season 1, Episode 1, Beware the Beast from Below. The episode begins with Velma escorting a group of tourists as they travel around the town. Velma tells the tourists stories about documented cases of a supposed curse that exists in the town. The first being in 1630 when a garrison of conquistadors arrived in Crystal Cove but vanished soon after, and then in 1765 when a portion of the town disappeared mysteriously alongside a group of missionaries that first established the town, followed by the affluent Darrow family who vanished on Halloween night 70 years ago and had their entire estate disappear with them. The curse is talked about briefly, but it's referenced as just another spooky tale, one that Velma thinks is fake and that her mother and Danny Binkley exaggerates in order to get unsuspecting tourists to buy merchandise from the Crystal Cove Spook Museum. Later in the episode, a supposed green slime monster begins to terrorize the town and trapping people inside cocoons. The mystery gang are tasked with finding and uncovering who is behind the attacks. As the gang race to find the monster, their investigation leads them to a cave beneath Crystal Cove.
I'm back.
Searching the cave, Daphne finds a golden locket on the floor with a question mark engraved on its outside and on the inside a picture of a teenage boy and girl. The gang assume it belongs to the person behind the attacks. However, nearing the end
My
of the
skin is
episode,
on
the monster is
fire.
unmasked by the teenagers before Mayor Jones as Professor Lafalo. Lafalo denies that the locket is his and insists that he's never seen it before. Daphne and the gang are left in possession of the locket and confused by where it came from. Unbeknownst to the group, Mayor Jones, Fred's father, had noticed the locket and seemed to have recognized it but remained silent. At the end of the episode, the gang hang out at the Cable, a radio station owned by their friend Angel Dynamite. Daphne continues to wonder who the locket belongs to as she talks with Fred. In the middle of that conversation, the phone in the room rings and Shaggy, expecting it to be a radio request from the viewers, answers it, only to be met with a sinister voice telling him that they're doomed. Everybody immediately gathers around the phone as the voice on the other end introduces himself as Mr. E and tells them they should have never taken the locket from the caves, and in doing so that they have uncovered a truth that should have remained hidden, a truth behind the curse of Crystal Cove, and that the real mystery has just begun.
Like Kangaroo 101.4. What can we scare up for you, Daddy-O? Who is this? You can call me Mr. E. You should never have brought that locket out of the cave. You don't know what you've uncovered.
Uncovered? Uncovered what?
A truth that should have remained hidden. The truth behind the curse of Crystal Cove. The real mystery has just begun.
This call from Mr. E would be the first of many, and it will ultimately set in motion everything that would happen in the series. Following the events of the previous episode, episode 2, The Creeping Creatures, opens with the mystery gang congregated at Fred's house on a rainy night during a thunderstorm. The gang speculate about
Drink
Mr.
the
E
shit
because
out of
Mr. E
myself.
knows about the curse. As the gang talk about Mr.
Hi.
E, a knock is heard at the front door. Fred goes to answer the door and is met by a postman holding a package addressed to Fred Jones. Fred takes the package inside and opens it in front of his friends. Inside the package is an envelope with a bright red E as the seal from none other than Mr. E. Alongside the letter, a handbag made of supposed real alligator skin from Gatorsburg. Upon seeing the bag, the gang immediately doubt the validity of the animal product. As it turns out, Gatorsburg is the neighboring town of Crystal Cove, and it had run out of gators years ago after prospectors came into the town in search of gold in the 1800s, but instead dug up alligators which were used for animal products. The gang then reads a letter which states, "Save this for a rainy day. Enjoy." Alluding to the
I
idea
know.
that there is a mystery lurking in Gatorsburg.
I
The
know.
gang then decide to pursue the mystery, driving to Gatorsburg, a spooky town that
I
is
like
now
to
in
do
the
makeup
midst of
though.
nothing.
It annoys me
Teenagers
quite
from Gatorsburg
a lot
investigating the case of the
when
supposed
people
real animal
who
skin.
don't do
Their
makeup
band members are
sit
Mystery
here
Machine,
and say,
Bryce
"You
Down,
look so
and their
good
house
without
guides
makeup."
Freddie Grader, Greta Grader, and Gunter Grader. An unsettling
I
family
know
that
that.
still live in Gatorsburg despite
I
its
am well
desertion
aware
and
of that.
belong to the days where
You think I
Gatorsburg
don't
life
know
when the
this?
town was thriving.
You think I
During the
don't
night,
get
the
bullied by my
teenagers check
mother
into
every
the
single
Grassberg
day of my
Hotel,
life?
a hotel owned
Do
by
you
Vera
think
and
she
her
doesn't make
family,
me
but they are
cry?
attacked by 3 alligator-like creatures who chase them out of Gatorsburg. The gang realize that this is the mystery Mr. E wanted them to investigate, which leads them to return to Gatorsburg in order to find out who and what the alligator creatures are.
Burnt
By
the
the end of the
shit out of my
episode, the gang
hand.
uncover that the alligator creatures are unsurprisingly the Gator family, who had been making imitation alligator products and had been dressing up as gators to scare away anyone who would dare step into Gatorsburg and uncover their plans. The Gator family are then taken into custody by the Crystal Cove Police Department. The mystery gang asks for a ride home as their van is still broken, but there is simply not enough space. The teenagers assume that they're stuck in Gatorsburg, however they hear the mystery machine rev up to life suddenly. The mystery machine has been mysteriously fixed, and on the hood of the van is a letter with Mr. E's insignia, a letter that delivers another warning.
Hope you had a good time in Gatorsburg, but be warned, there are more mysteries to come. This is only one piece of the puzzle.
Skipping over to episode 4, Revenge of the Man Crab, the mystery gang are tasked with dealing with a mutant crab who's abducting kids at the beach and ruining the volleyball tournament that Crystal Cove is hosting. The kids race against time to stop and find this man crab before it abducts anybody else. To do so, they seek help from Angel, and it is there at the Cable during their investigation that they are sent another letter from Mr. E. this time containing an old torn-up newspaper article about 4 kids who disappeared in the Crystal Cove caves and a brief 8-track tape of Mr. E's voice with a message suggesting that they investigated. Angel, who was with them, asks to look at the article, seemingly taking a great interest in it, but when she is asked, denies knowing anything about the 4 missing kids. The mystery gang disregard Mr. E's request momentarily, focusing on solving the man-crab mystery instead. By the end of the episode, they solve it and once again return to the cable lounge to recuperate, while Angel works in the broadcast booth. Velma then brings up a previous letter that Mr. E had given them, as well as a newspaper article. Upon seeing this, Daphne gasps, stating that she recognizes 2 of the kids in the article. She pulls out the locket she found in the cave and holds it side by side to the article, revealing that the 2 kids in the locket are the same ones in the article who disappeared. Now, with some semblance of a lead, Velma announces that this is yet another mystery they have to solve.
Hi everyone.
Again, Angel suspiciously listens into their conversation through the station's soundboard. The episode ends there, hinting at the fact that perhaps Angel, just like Mayor Jones in episode 1, knows more than they're letting on. Episode 6, The Legend of Alice May, continues the mystery of the supposed curse. In this episode, a string of disappearances, all who happen to be teenage boys, begin to occur during prom night, and they're all caused by an apparent ghost girl. Meanwhile, at Crystal Cove High School, a prom is being held soon. Daphne, wanting to go with Fred, begins to drop subtle hints, but he is stupidly oblivious to her advances. This angers Daphne, but she's angered more by Fred's attachment to a new transfer student by the name of Alice May, a blonde teenage girl who everybody is interested in. To make matters worse, Alice reciprocates Fred's interest, which immediately causes Daphne to dislike her. Daphne's dislike and suspicion towards Alice May grows as she realizes that Alice transferred around the same time that the reports began to come up about the ghost girl. She's the only one to notice this though, but she keeps it to herself. Later at night, Daphne stays back at the school library researching the 4 missing kids from the Crystal Cove caves. However, unsuccessfully, as any records relating to any missing kids look as if they have been purposely removed or destroyed. Suddenly, the lights in the library go out. Daphne tries to turn the lights back on, but as she struggles with them, she hears footsteps in the dark which startle her. She calls out, hoping to get someone to respond. Instead, she sees what appears to be a person watching her from afar, but as she takes a step towards them, the figure runs away. Daphne immediately gives chase, following the figure, which leads her to the girls' locker room, but there she finds nobody. Daphne is racked with nerves, so she stands in front of one of the bathroom mirrors and splashes her face with some water from the sink to calm herself. However, when she opens her eyes and wipes the water from her face, she sees in the reflection of the mirror a ghoulish figure standing behind her. But when she turns around, it's only Alice May, who says she's been using the showers at school since the water at her house has not been turned on yet. Daphne is unconvinced by this answer and is still skeptical of Alice. Her suspicions are confirmed to be true as towards the end of the episode, the ghost girl is revealed to be none other than Alice May, who confesses to kidnapping teenage boys and would have done the same to Fred to get revenge. It turns out that Alice is Deacon Carswell's daughter. Deacon Carswell being an off-screen character who is referenced as the Creeper, a man who adorned a costume and terrorized the town but was thrown in jail after being foiled by the mystery gang. Alice had come up with an elaborate plan to get back at the mystery gang for taking her father away from her, but just like her father, she was foiled by the mystery gang. Alice is taken away by the sheriff and Daphne rejoices at the mystery being solved and the idea that no one is taking Fred away. However, the biggest twist comes towards the end of the episode. As Alice is being taken away, the gang go to the mystery machine intending to go home. Next to the van is a backpack that belonged to Alice May. Daphne takes the backpack, but as she does, an old yearbook falls out. She picks up the yearbook. Inside the yearbook is a page that has been bookmarked. Daphne flips to the page and is shocked by what she finds. On the pages are the photos of the 4 missing kids along with their names and details. The yearbook reveals that Brad Charles and Judy Reeves were the teenagers whose picture was in the locket. Ricky Owens and Cassidy Williams are the remaining teenagers, and in addition to this, they had an animal mascot called Professor Pericles. The yearbook also reveals that the teenagers were members of a mystery-solving club called Mystery Incorporated. Daphne shows her friends and the gang talk about the similarities between their group and Mystery Incorporated. They also decide to adopt the name Mystery Incorporated, referring to themselves as the New Mystery Inc. As the group reads more about the missing teenagers, elsewhere at the Crystal Cove County Jail, Alice May is bailed out by a mysterious man called Ed Machine, a man who is revealed to be an associate of Mr. E's. Once Alice is free, Ed Machine asks her if everything went according to plan, and Alice confirms that she left her backpack for the mystery gang to find, and that she'll be long gone before they realize that Deacon Carswell had her daughter. Alice then questions why such an elaborate plan was hatched for something as simple as a yearbook, but Ed tells her that she was paid for a job and that all she needs to know is Mr. E wants the mystery gang to investigate the disappearances of 4 teenagers.
Let's just say he needed them to start looking into the real mystery hiding beneath crystal code. A mystery that led to the disappearance of 4 youths. A mystery whose time has come to be solved.
We jump over to episode 8, The Grasp of the Gnome, where yet another creature is terrorizing the townsfolk. This time, a gnome is terrorizing the people of Crystal Cove, particularly those dressed as pirates at a renaissance.
Hi.
King Christian IX's descendants. The children of the daughters. King Christian IX of Denmark is known as the father-in-law of Europe. His 6 children inherited, married into, or were appointed to monarchies all over the continent. Between them, they gave Christian and his queen Louisa 39 grandchildren and many more descendants who occupied 9 different European thrones. Denmark, of course, but also Norway, Belgium, the United Kingdom, Greece, Spain, Russia, Romania, and Luxembourg. They spanned 128 years of history, Prince Albert Victor being born in 1864, and Princess Margaret of Bourbon-Parma living to see 1992. Among them, they fought on both sides of 2 world wars, won and lost various thrones, married their cousins, and had many lurid affairs. Here are the stories of the children of Christian IX's 3 daughters. The children of Alexandra, Queen of the UK. Christian's eldest daughter married Edward, Prince of Wales, Queen Victoria's son and heir. Alexandra was a loving and dedicated mother, much to her strict mother-in-law's consternation. Victoria frequently criticized Alexandra for caring for her children herself rather than handing them off to servants. But Alexandra ignored the queen and was a well-loved mother and grandmother to the future monarchs of the United Kingdom. Her 6 children were Albert Victor, second in line to the throne, was 13 when he and his brother George were packed up on board the HMS Britannia to be educated as naval cadets. They traveled the world, and Albert's charm made him popular.
I burnt my
overseas.
hand,
As
so
grew,
if
he
you're wondering
became a
why the fuck
playboy
I
like his
am
father. He was twice
having
involved in
difficulty,
scandal.
I burnt my
Once
hand.
when a homosexual brothel was discovered by police, and Albert's close friend was exposed as a client. Later, it was speculated that Albert might have been Jack the Ripper, a serial killer who mutilated 5 prostitutes in London and was never identified. Albert was almost certainly not culpable in either case. He became engaged to Mary of Teck, but died of influenza shortly before the wedding. He was 28. For many years, the popular line on Albert was that he was a wastrel who lacked intelligence and that the UK dodged a bullet, never having him as king. But this story has recently been considered as propaganda coming from his brother, George V. Albert certainly struggled under an abominable tutor who tried to cover up his own shortcomings by claiming the prince was a dull student. However, shortly before his death, the Prime Minister intended to appoint Albert as Viceroy of Ireland, a position requiring tact and diplomacy. He was sympathetic to the Irish Home Rule movement, and he might have done a great deal for Ireland and all of the British Empire had he lived to wear the crown. George may or may not have been more intelligent than his older brother, but he was certainly more serious and boring. When Albert Victor died, George took his place in the line of succession. He also took his place at the altar and married his brother's fiancée, Mary of Teck. He became King George V of the United Kingdom in 1910 at the age of 44.
Wait, what?
In 1914, George's cousin,
It's,
Kaiser Wilhelm, invaded France
tie-dye.
and Britain declared war on Germany. George made the prudent decision to renounce all his hereditary German titles and change the family name from Saxe-Coburg and Gotha to the more English-sounding Windsor. With so few monarchies left after World War I, George decreed that his children need not marry foreign royals. He signed the Home Rule Bill, making Ireland its own nation, and saw several other parts of the British Empire become legally independent. They are now the Commonwealth. They have their own governments, but the British monarch is still nominally their head of state. George died at 70 after 26 years on the throne. The crown went first to his son Edward VIII, who abdicated in order to marry an American divorcee, Wallace Simpson, and then to his second son, George VI, who was an admirable leader of his people in World War II. His daughter is the current Queen, Elizabeth II. Louise married Scotsman Alexander Duff, Earl of Fife, and her grandmother, Queen Victoria, promoted him to Duke of Fife. The couple had 3 daughters. The first was stillborn. In 1911, Louise and her family were sailing to Egypt when they were shipwrecked off the coast of Morocco. They survived the ordeal and were rescued, but Alexander contracted a chest cold which killed him a few weeks later. Louise died in 1931 at the age of 63. Victoria, known as Toria, was beautiful and had several suitors, including King Carlos I of Portugal. However, her mother discouraged her from marrying, and she instead remained a companion of her parents. When her mother died in 1925, Victoria moved to a country house in Buckinghamshire where she got involved with village life and was president of the local horticultural society. Maud was athletic and loved to be outdoors.
A history channel on our podcast.
She married her first cousin, Prince Carl, the second son of the King of Denmark. In 1905, the Norwegian Parliament dissolved their union with Denmark and offered the crown to Carl, who became King Håkon VII. Maud thrived in her role as Queen Consort of Norway. She was very involved in charity work, especially benefiting children and animals, and became a fashion icon with a very slim corseted waist. The family embraced the Norwegian lifestyle and learned to ski. Maud died at 68 while visiting the UK. Through her only child, Olaf V, she is the grandmother of the current King of Norway, Harald V. Alexander John was born prematurely and died 24 hours after being born. Edward placed his infant son in his coffin personally, with tears rolling down his cheeks. The children of Maria Fyodorowna, Tsarina of Russia. Princess Dagmar married the future Tsar Alexander III of Russia and took the Russian name Maria. Both parents were loving and gentle to their 6 children who grew up with a sense of familial closeness missing in many royal households. They were sheltered as much as possible from the near constant fear of assassination their parents faced. The family's dining room was blown up, and they were all involved in a train wreck, which was likely the result of sabotage. As they entered adulthood, Maria's children faced horror and downfall during the Russian Revolution. Nikolai fell in love with Alex of Hesse, a granddaughter of Queen Victoria. She was not seen as an important enough bride for the future Tsar, but shortly following his father's death, he married her anyway. He ascended to the Russian throne as Tsar Nikolai II at the age of 26. He was ill-suited to the job. He took the advice of his uncle and his father's ministers and continued to keep Russia under the thumb of imperial power, rather than
I
allowing
burnt the
a
ever-loving
constitution or other
shit out of
changes
myself.
people were beginning to clamor for. The disastrous loss of the Russo-Japanese War damaged his reputation. His Tsarina Alexandra was unpopular as well. She was shy and spoke very poor Russian. After 10 years of marriage and 4 daughters, she finally gave birth to a son and heir. However, Alexei suffered from hemophilia, common in Queen Victoria's bloodline, and many feared that the Tsarevich would never live to inherit the throne. During World War I, Nikolai took personal command of the Russian army, but was a terrible military leader. His poor decisions led to the deaths of 3 million Russian soldiers. While he was away, Alexandra was left in charge. She allowed mystic healer Rasputin, who seemed to be curing her beloved son, increased political power. But Rasputin was hated by the people and added yet another black mark on the royal family's reputation. After the disaster of World War I, revolution broke out and the Tsar was forced to abdicate. He hoped that his family might be allowed asylum in the UK, but his cousin, King George V, feared being associated with a man now labeled a tyrant and refused to intervene. Nikolai and his family were held under house arrest for several months. On July 17, 1918, Nikolai, Alexandra, and their 5 children,
Don't
Olga,
start with this
Tatiana,
shit.
Maria, Anastasia,
I'm
and
not in the
Alexei,
fucking
were taken
mood.
to the basement and
Hey,
shot
that's
to
nothing.
death.
Well, then why the fuck did
Nikolai
Jesus
was
give me a
15.
mom that
The
hates me?
remains of the family were
Why did he
recovered
put
in
me through all this?
1998 and
Why
2007,
would he
and
make
they
me
were
purposely
remarried in St.
never a
Petersburg.
believer of him? In an
Alexander,
environment where I really
Maria's
should have
second son,
been.
died of meningitis
Let's
1
let's
month
be
shy
honest.
of his
If
first
he loved
birthday.
me so much,
His
was
heartbroken
I
mother
like a
wrote
fucking
to her
dictator in
own
my
mother.
past
The
life?
doctors
Was I
maintained
a
he did not
fucking
suffer,
dictator?
but
Did
we
I
suffered
kill
with
people
him.
in mass droves? Like what the
George
fuck?
was
Did I
known for
cause
his
like
mother's elder brother
a
in
mass
George's first
suicide?
Greece.
Why
He
the fuck
outshone
am I
his
getting
older
punished so
brother
much in this
Nikolai
life?
in many ways. He was taller, more intelligent, and more sociable, and he often got away with mischief. George had a promising naval career ahead of him until he fell ill with tuberculosis at 19 and continued to suffer from poor health for the rest of his life. He left with his older brother and their cousin George of Greece on a voyage to Asia. The young men visited Egypt and India. On the way to Japan, George fell ill and had to return home. When his brother Nikolai became Tsar, George became Tsarevich and heir presumptive, though he was not able to attend his brother's coronation because of his poor health. When George was 28, he went out for a ride on his motorcycle when a local woman found him collapsed on the side of the road, bleeding from the mouth and struggling to breathe. She held him until he died. His brother and mother were particularly devastated at the loss. Xenia was a shy and creative child. She enjoyed making costumes and puppets for her siblings to put on shows. At 11, she developed a crush on her 20-year-old cousin, Grand Duke Alexander Mikhailovich. When Xenia was 15, a romance had blossomed, and the couple asked permission to be wed, but were told to wait until she was older. They married when the princess was 19 and had 7 children together. Later in their marriage, the couple grew apart, and both had numerous affairs. Eventually, Alexander moved away
I'm
to
going
Paris.
to strip my walls of all its art because we apparently don't know time and place.
Xenia was very involved in charity work and was a patron of one of the first child care centers for working class families in Russia. She supported tuberculosis hospitals after her brother George died of the disease. During World War I, she funded a medical train, established a hospital, and provided artificial limbs for wounded soldiers. She warned her brother, Tsar Nikolai, against many of the disastrous actions he took leading up to the revolution, but he ignored her advice. Xenia saw the writing on the wall and evacuated her family to the Crimea. When she received the news that her brother and his family had been murdered, she was able to escape Russia along with her mother and children. Her aunt, Queen Alexandra, sent a British warship to evacuate them to the UK. She spent the rest of her life nearly penniless and was allowed to live at Frogmore Cottage on the Windsor estate, the current home of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. In the 1920s, a woman named Anna Anderson claimed to be Anastasia, the youngest daughter of Tsar Nikolai. Anderson repeatedly asked for money from the surviving members of the Romanov family and tried to vilify Xenia in the press. Anderson was later revealed to have been a fraud. Xenia died in 1960 at the age of 85. Mikhail was quiet and good-natured. He set out on a career in the army. While attending the funeral of Queen Victoria, he met Princess Beatrice of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, daughter of Victoria's second son, Alfred. They wished to wed, but the Orthodox Church forbid marriages between first cousins. Mikhail then had a romance with his sister Olga's lady-in-waiting, a commoner named Dina. The family was appalled and threatened Mikhail with expulsion from the military and set the secret police to follow Dina and keep the couple apart. Eventually, she gave up and moved abroad. His next lover, Natalia, was the wife of a fellow officer. She divorced her husband and moved in with Mikhail, and the couple had a son, George. While on holiday in France, Mikhail and Natalia slipped the secret police who had been trailing them, traveled incognito to Vienna, and eloped. The Tsar was furious and he banished his brother from Russia and froze his assets. Marrying a commoner barred Mikhail from the succession, and with his own son Alexei dangerously ill, this left the future of the Romanov dynasty in peril. The newlyweds and their son lived in France for the next few years. But when World War I broke out, Mikhail wrote to Nikolai offering his support and was allowed to return home with his wife and son to serve in the army.
Really?
Following
No.
the long and brutal
Jesus.
war, Mikhail was one of many members of the family who warned the Tsar of the growing unrest in Russia, but was ignored.
Okay, so all of his family was being like, dude, you're fucking up.
But
No,
both
I'm
the
not.
Tsar and the revolutionaries refused to compromise, and Nikolai was eventually forced to abdicate. Nikolai feared for the safety of his ailing son, so instead named Mikhail his successor. He was proclaimed Tsar Mikhail II by royalists, but was arrested by the revolutionaries. He lived for 15 months under house arrest, but in June 1918 was driven to the countryside and shot to death. His body was never recovered. Natalia and George escaped Russia and were smuggled to the UK. Olga had a strained relationship with her mother and longed for independence. So at 18, she accepted the proposal of 33-year-old Duke Peter of Oldenburg. The court was astonished as Peter was known to be homosexual. Olga soon realized that this hasty marriage had been a mistake. She spent their wedding night crying while Peter was out all night partying. The newlyweds moved in with his family,
Gay or
who
not,
badgered
you're some
Olga for
husband,
royal
motherfucker.
favors. Things improved when they moved into their own palace with separate bedrooms. Peter was kind and they enjoyed hunting wolves together, but she longed for a loving marriage and children. She fell in love
Sweet,
with
they
an
had
army
companionship.
officer, Nikolai Kulovsky, and asked Peter for a divorce.
People weren't
He
gay.
refused, but allowed
Or no.
Nikolai to move in with Olga. But the strain and secrecy of the arrangement took their toll, and Olga
It's
suffered a
about
desperate
the
marriage.
original
Finally,
Russian
after
family
15
of
years misery,
when there
her brother,
was
the Tsar, granted her
kings and
annulment,
queens and
and
shit.
she and Nikolai married in a
Basically,
civil ceremony.
you know, the whole story
During
of like
World War I, Olga worked as
the
an
people that
army
were in
nurse
charge of
and was
Russia
awarded the Order
get
of
shot
St.
in the head
George for her bravery. As
and
the
buried in
Romanovs
a shallow
began to be
grave.
arrested by revolutionaries, Olga and her family escaped to the Crimea. When
That
the Tsar was
family,
killed,
but like the
most of the Romanovs
extended
fled,
family.
but Olga and her husband refused
I like to
leave
hear
Russia.
about because I
They were
watched
soon
the
forced to
movie
flee ahead of the
Anastasia as a
Bolshevik army.
kid
They escaped to
like,
refugee
a
camp in
handful of times,
Turkey,
and I
where Olga
loved
gave
it.
birth to her second child.
I
The
loved
family
it.
eventually made it to
It might as well have
Denmark
been
and had
educational
little choice
television
but
to
move
my
in
little nerd
with
ass.
Olga's mother,
I fucking
Dowager
loved it.
Empress Maria. Olga
And like I
kept
know
up
when
she
that
started,
stuff ever
and after
happened,
the
she
death
wasn't
of her
actually a
mother,
princess,
who
and the
demanded
princess
she
was
be
around
at
like
her beck
fucking
and call,
2023,
her
her
husband
fucking
had children
anyway.
with Olga.
But
After
I
10
know all
years,
this,
the Dowager Empress died,
but they
and
could have
Olga
made
used the little money
it
she
be like,
inherited
this
to
is
buy a
the
farm.
bitch that pretended to be the
family was
princess and
content
tried to
to
harass the
raise
family.
animals and live a simple life. During German occupation of Denmark in World War II, both of Olga's sons served as Danish spies and were imprisoned by the Nazis. Olga herself supported Russians working against communism in the Soviet Union. She began to fear assassination by the Soviet government, and the family decided to immigrate to Canada. Their sons, now married
went
with
to
children of their
Canada.
own, came with them, and the family bought and worked a farm in Ontario. Olga was also a talented painter.
Ontario's the
Grand
capital of
Duchess Olga
Canada. No.
continued to be a draw
Yes.
for visiting royals, including
I think
Queen
so.
Elizabeth II, who invited her to lunch on the royal yacht in
Oh.
1959. Olga died in 1960 at the age of 78 and was buried next to her husband.
Isn't
The children of
wasn't
Crown
Queen
Princess
Elizabeth's
of Hanover.
husband like a descendant of the German
At
half of
18, Tura
all
gave
that?
birth to a daughter,
Or am I
Anna
making
Wedlock,
that up?
who was adopted
I
by
feel
a
like it's
Danish
right.
family and named Kate. Little else is known about her. Tura later married Ernst August, Crown Prince of Hanover, whose family had been overthrown during the unification of Germany. The couple settled down in Austria and preferred a quiet life at home with their 6 children, who were Marie Louise married Prince Maximilian of Baden, a first cousin of Emperor Napoleon III of France. They had 2 children, Marie Alexandra and Berthold. George Wilhelm was a captain in the Austrian army on the way to Denmark to attend the funeral of his uncle, King Frederick VIII,
Thank you.
who died in a car crash at the age of
Damn
31.
it.
Alexandra married Frederick Francis IV, Grand Duke of Mecklenburg-Schwerin, settled in Germany and had 5 children. Olga never married and was well loved by her nieces and nephews, one of whom named his daughter in her honor. Christian died tragically at 16 from undiagnosed appendicitis. Ernst August was sent to Germany to thank Kaiser Wilhelm for sending his brother's body home after he died in a car crash in Germany. While at the imperial court, he met and fell in love with the Kaiser's only daughter, Victoria. Their wedding in 1913 was the last time Kaiser Wilhelm of Germany, King George V of the UK, and Tsar Nikolai of Russia ever met before they went to war. Ernst's father inherited the Duchy of
That could not have been
Brunswick from
fun.
a childhood
Hey, I'll see you
cousin
one more at
and
war.
renounced it in favor of his son. So Ernst and Victoria raised their 5 children in Brunswick Palace. Through
It's just
his
you see
father,
your families
Ernst
a
was
wedding
the
and you're fighting
great-great-grandson
with
of
them,
King George
like a
III
big,
of the UK,
big boy
and was
war.
therefore also a British prince. He had to gain permission from his cousin, King George V of the UK, to marry the German princess.
Wasn't that
And
fucking
2
Queen
imprisoned
Elizabeth there?
British spies were released by Germany as a wedding
Am I making
present.
that up?
Upon his engagement,
I might
Ernst
be.
swore loyalty to the German Empire, and when the war broke out, he served as a major general in the German army. Following the German Revolution in 1918, Ernst was forced to abdicate the throne, along with the rest of the German nobility. Because of his British familial connections, both he and his wife desired reconciliation with the UK as the Nazi Party began to gain power. Adolf Hitler asked the couple to arrange a marriage between their daughter
Ugh.
Frederica and Edward, Prince of Wales.
Oh, she was
But they
pretty.
refused as the
Edward,
prince
Prince
was
of Wales. Why is that
23 years
Prince of
older than
Wales?
their daughter. Frederica
That's a-
instead married her cousin Paul and became the Queen of Greece.
Okay, still married a cousin.
Ernst died in 1953
Seems
at
like
the
a bad
age of
idea.
65.
You would think during that
In
time
the
you
next
maybe want to
episode,
marry a
we'll
convert a
look at the
little more.
fascinating children of King Christian IX's sons. Among
I mean,
them,
Hitler
they
tried to
defied the
arrange you.
Nazis, served in the French
I'd be
Foreign
like,
Legion,
Mr.
won and
Hitler,
lost
I'm
various
gonna go
thrones,
marry
and
Frederick
foiled
over here.
assassination attempts.
He works on a
If you
farm
enjoyed
and
this
has
video,
no kid.
please like, subscribe, comment your thoughts, and check out my other royal history videos. If you really want to help, please consider supporting me on Patreon. A link is in the description. Thank you for watching. King Christian IX's descendants. The children of the sons. King Christian IX of Denmark is known as the father-in-law of Europe. His 6 children inherited, married into, or were appointed to monarchies all over the continent. Between them, they gave Christian and his queen Louisa 39 grandchildren and many more descendants who occupied 9 different European thrones. Denmark, of course, but also Norway, Belgium, the United Kingdom, Greece, Spain, Russia, Romania, and Luxembourg. They spanned 128 years of history, Prince Albert Victor being born in 1864, and Princess Margaret of Bourbon-Parma living to see 1992. Among them, they defied the Nazis, served in the French Foreign Legion, won and lost various thrones, and foiled assassination attempts. Here are the stories of the children of King Christian IX's 3 sons. The children of King Frederick VIII of Denmark. The Crown Prince of Denmark, Frederick, married Princess Louise of Sweden and Norway. Louise was extremely strict and harsh with the children. She often chased an offending child with a stick, and they would hide under their father's desk so that he could defend them. This led to 8 children who were very well behaved, but not particularly happy. Christian embarked on a naval education, as was family tradition. He married Alexandrine, daughter of the Grand Duke of Mecklenburg-Schwerin. The couple were given 3 palaces in which to raise their 2 sons. When his father died in 1912, he became King Christian X of Denmark at the age of 42. It has been royal tradition since the 16th century that the regal names of Danish kings alternate between Christian and Frederick. In 1918, Iceland, a long-time Danish realm, moved to become a sovereign state, but with a personal union with the King of Denmark. Thus, Christian also became the King of Iceland. In 1920, he instigated the Easter Crisis, which nearly toppled the Danish monarchy. Following World War I, Germany's weakened position made it possible for Denmark to retake the long-disputed territory of Schleswig. The people of northern Schleswig were mostly Danish and voted to rejoin Denmark, while those in the south voted to remain with Germany. Parliament agreed that only the northern half of Schleswig would be reintegrated. However, King Christian insisted that they take the whole region. The prime minister resigned in protest, and the people rioted against the king, who had overstepped his position as a constitutional monarch. Facing revolution, Christian wisely backed down, and for the rest of his reign, he mostly stayed out of politics. In 1940, Germany clapped back and invaded. Denmark had no choice but to surrender to the Nazi occupation. Christian refused to leave his kingdom and became a symbol of resistance. Now in his 70s, the king could be seen riding his horse through the streets of Copenhagen every day. He personally funded the evacuation of Danish Jews to neutral Sweden. King Christian lived to see the defeat of the Nazis and died in 1947 at the age of 76. A cloth armband worn by members of the resistance movement was placed on his coffin. His eldest son followed him as King Frederick IX, and his granddaughter is the current Queen of Denmark, Margrethe II. Karl was educated in the Navy like his older brother, and then moved forward with a career as an officer. At 24, he married his first cousin, Maud of Wales, granddaughter of Queen Victoria, at Buckingham Palace. The pair had a love match and got along well. They had one child, Alexander. Karl's paternal grandfather had been King Charles XV of Sweden and IV of Norway. But in 1905, Norway dissolved their union with Sweden. Karl was offered the new Norwegian crown, but he was democratically minded and said he would only accept if a vote was held to determine if a constitutional monarchy was really what the Norwegian people wanted. They did, and Karl was enthusiastically elected king with a 79% majority. He further endeared himself to his new people by taking the ancient Norse name of Håkon VII, which hadn't been used in 500 years. His son's name was also changed to Olaf. He and Maud were crowned king and queen in Nidaros Cathedral. They traveled extensively through their new kingdom, and although Håkon had considerable power on paper, he respected the parliament and stayed out of politics. In 1938, Queen Maud died suddenly at the age of 68. In 1940, Nazi forces attempted to invade Oslo. They were temporarily held off, giving the king, the prince, and other government officials time to escape the capital, but the German occupation was inevitable. Håkon refused to abdicate or legitimize the new Nazi puppet regime, so the Germans bombed and destroyed the town the royals had fled to. Håkon, Olaf, and his family and several others escaped and hid in the snowy woods, eventually reaching the border of neutral Sweden, where they were evacuated to the UK. In London, they set up a Norwegian government in exile, and Håkon frequently broadcast messages of hope and defiance back to Norway via the BBC. Norwegians took to wearing coins emblazoned with Håkon's monogram, H7, as symbols of resistance. Following the German defeat in 1945, the king returned home to much acclaim. He lived an active life well into his 80s and died in 1957 at the age of 85. He was followed by his son, King Olaf V, and his grandson is the current king, Harald V of Norway. Louise married Prince Frederick of Schomberg-Lippe and moved with him to Germany. They had 3 children. The marriage was very unhappy, and Louise returned home to Denmark often, staying months at a time. Her father also visited her every year. She died in 1906 at the age of 31, officially of meningitis, though it was rumored that she had attempted to drown herself in a lake and caught a chill which killed her. Harald joined the Danish army at 17 and eventually attained the rank of lieutenant general. He married his second cousin, Princess Helena of Schleswig-Holstein, Sonderburg-Glücksburg, and the couple had 5 children. Harald retired from active duty in 1938. When Germany occupied Denmark, German-born Princess Helena became deeply unpopular for her support of the Nazi occupation. She was not on speaking terms with her sons, who both served in the Danish military. After the Nazi defeat, Helena escaped criminal prosecution for
I really
collaboration,
encourage
only
all of you
because she
to
was a
just
member
like
of the
honestly
royal
listen
family,
to
but
history
was exiled from
because
Denmark.
you will
She
notice
was
some
allowed to
things
return in
that still
1947
happen
to be with her
sometimes.
husband on his deathbed.
And sometimes those
Ingeborg
people have
entered into
really,
an
really
arranged
bad
marriage
straight
with her
hands
maternal first cousin,
instead
Prince
of a
Carl of
teeny
Sweden.
tiny
The
little
couple were complete
mustache.
strangers on their
And
wedding
they
day, but got on
say
well
really,
and had a
really
happy
weird
and
shit.
simple domestic life with their 4 children, Margareta, Marta, Astrid,
And you know,
and Carl.
like
Ingeborg's stuffy
a
mother-in-law,
psychological
Queen Sophia,
similarity.
seldom
And you're just like,
attended public
oh
events,
my god,
and her
we're
sister-in-law,
screwed.
Princess Victoria, was too ill to go out in public. But Ingeborg was easygoing and friendly. She enjoyed participating in public functions and picked up the slack for her relatives, quickly becoming the most popular member of the Swedish royal family. Carl and Ingeborg lost a great deal of money and had to sell their home when a bank they invested in crashed in 1922. But the couple took the loss in stride. They hadn't indulged in wealth and glamour before the crash and were just as content raising their children in more modest surroundings. Ingeborg was portrayed as an ideal wife and mother in Swedish magazines. In 1905, when Norway split from Sweden, the Norwegian government discussed naming Carl and Ingeborg king and queen, but they declined and her brother was offered the crown instead. Ingeborg died in 1958 at the age of 79. Her daughter Marta married her first cousin, Olav, Crown Prince of Norway, but she died before becoming queen. She was the mother of the current king Harald V of Norway. Ingeborg's daughter Astrid married Leo III of Belgium and became Queen of the Belgians. She died at the age of 29 in a car crash. Her daughter Josephine Charlotte married Grand Duke Jean of Luxembourg and was the mother of the current Grand Duke Henri of Luxembourg. Both of Astrid's sons served as kings of the Belgians. First, King Boudouin, who died childless at 62, then Albert II, whose son is the current King Philippe of the Belgians. Tura had an affair with the young court doctor, Nils Ilsrud, but marriage to a commoner was, at the time, unthinkable, and Niels was dismissed from royal service. Both Tura and Niels remained unmarried for the rest of their lives, and Niels had a portrait of Tura on his bedside when he died. Tura was friendly and understanding, and her home was a popular retreat from court life for her relatives. Gustav also remained unmarried. He died in 1944, aged 57. Dalmar had better luck than her older sister, Tura. When she fell in love with the Danish aristocrat, 20 years after her sister's foiled romance, the royal family had progressed, and she was allowed to marry. The pair had 5 children together. She died in 1961 at the age of 71. The children of King George I of Greece. King George I and his wife Grand Duchess Olga Konstantinova of Russia were not wealthy by royal standards. They lived simply and were devoted and loving
Or,
parents with a happy
electing
domestic
certain
life.
people into
Their children
power.
all grew up culturally Greek and learned to speak Greek,
Not like the
English,
man with all the
Danish,
money
Russian,
working
French,
with that
and
man
Italian. The siblings
did say,
spoke
we are
Greek to one
going to
another
win.
and English with their parents. The parents spoke German to each other. Here are the stories of the 8 Greek and Danish royal children. Constantine was named for Constantine XI Palaeologos, the last Byzantine emperor. He received a
That,
military
especially
and
if you
political education
marry
in Germany and rose to the rank
Not
of a
Mary, oh
Major
my god.
General
If
in the
you
Greek army.
have an education in
Constantine
America,
married
you don't learn
Princess
about royal
Sophia of
history. They
Prussia,
don't teach
a
you
granddaughter
that.
of Queen Victoria and
To my
sister
knowledge,
of
they
Kaiser
teach you that in
Wilhelm II
Canada,
of
though, which
Germany.
is really
The
weird.
couple had 6 children.
Not America, the place
He
of
commanded the Greek
taking
army
land
during
from
the
people
Greco-Turkish War and lost badly, severely
and
damaging
mass
the monarchy's
murder
reputation.
and
Despite
slavery
protests,
and a
the prince
bunch of
was
other
once
shit.
again appointed
Wouldn't
commander
want you to
during the
hear
Balkan
about
Wars against
the
the Ottoman
world's
Empire.
history.
He fared much better this time, won the war, and doubled Greece's territory. His father was assassinated in 1913, and he ascended the throne as King Constantine I. At the outbreak of World War I,
Really, they really don't teach you
the
much.
Germans, and his brother-in-law, Kaiser Wilhelm,
I think you learn
had
about
wanted Greece
geography
to
like
remain
1
neutral. He
year,
was strongly
and then that's
opposed
it
by Prime Minister
for like world
Venizelos,
history.
who sided with the Allies. The disagreement nearly led to civil war. The king was forced to abdicate in 1917, and he and his eldest son George were driven into exile. His second son, Alexander, became a puppet king and was held prisoner in the palace by the Greek government while they joined the war on the side of the Allies. While strolling in the royal menagerie, King Alexander was bitten by a monkey. The minor wound soon turned septic, and Alexander died at the age of 27. By this time, Greece had been at war for 8 years. Once World War I was over, Greece had rolled right into yet another war with the Turks. Morale was minuscule as young men died and fields lay fallow. Venizelos was defeated in an election, and royalists promised a return to peace. Greece voted 99% in favor of Constantine returning as king. However, once voted in, the new government decided
Honestly,
to
and you learn
continue
about
the war.
world history your
Constantine
freshman year of
personally
high
commanded
school.
and lost
So, like, the
another battle,
worst time
and the
for
army rose
anybody
up
to be
against
learning
him,
about it.
forcing him to
Because let's be
abdicate for a
honest,
second
we're all
time
dealing
in
with a fuck ton
1922.
freshman year.
Constantine died
And you're like,
in exile in Italy 4 months
you're
later
gonna
at
learn
the age
about
of
world
54.
history now. And I know none of you are
His
listening
eldest son,
and you
George,
have all your
followed
heads
him
down.
as king. 2 years into his reign, Greece declared itself a republic, and the royal family was forced into exile again.
Maybe it's just
In the
the,
next
maybe
11
it's just
years, the
Texas
nation
one.
had 23 changes of government, a dictatorship, and 13 coups. To put an end to the chaos, George was asked to return as king and ruled another 12 years. He died childless in 1947 and was succeeded by his brother Paul, who ruled until his death in 1964. Paul's son, King Constantine II, saw the final dissolution of the Greek monarchy in 1973 in favor of a republic. He and his children currently live abroad. Paul's daughter Sophia married King Juan Carlos I of Spain and is the mother of the current King of Spain, Philip VI. Constantine I was also the grandfather through his son Alexander of Alexandra, who became Queen of Yugoslavia when she married King Peter II. That monarchy was abolished in 1945. Constantine's daughter Helen married King Carol II of Romania. Their son, King Michael, was overthrown by a communist dictatorship
Mine
in
was
1947.
freshman year.
George
Was world
sent to
geography,
Denmark
and
at
then
14 to join the
I think
Danish
I
Navy.
learned
He
very
felt
shortly
abandoned by his father and
about
grew very
Hitler,
attached to his uncle,
like what would have
Valdemar,
been my
with whom
junior
he
year,
lived. At 22,
and that was
George
it.
went on a tour of Asia with his cousin Tsarevich Nikolai of Russia. While the young men were returning from a day trip to Kaito, a Japanese police officer attempted to assassinate Nikolai with a saber. George fought the man off with his cane, saving his cousin's life. The prince was later involved in planning the 1896 Summer Olympics in Athens and headed up the committee on nautical sports. At 38, George agreed to an arranged marriage with Princess Marie Bonaparte, the great-grandniece of Emperor Napoleon I of France. They had 2 children, Petros and Eugenia. Marie found George's unusually close relationship with his uncle Valdemar to be very odd, and she and her husband grew apart. She had strong flirtations with Valdemar and his son, Prince Agé, and a full-on affair with French Prime Minister Aristide Briand, none of which George objected to. Marie studied psychoanalysis under Sigmund Freud and aided Freud's
I don't
escape
think
from Nazi
so.
Germany.
I
George
also
lived
had
to the age of
independent
88 and
schooling,
was the
if
last
that makes
survivor
sense,
of
like
George's
at your own
first
pace.
children.
So I did 3 years of
Alexandra
high
was a
school
joyful
in
child
6
and a
months.
favorite among her siblings. At 18, she married her maternal first cousin, Grand Duke Paul Alexandrovich of Russia. The pair had 2 children, Maria and Dmitri. While 7 months pregnant with Dmitri, 21-year-old Alexandra jumped into a boat and fell. The following day, while attending a ball, she collapsed with violent labor pains. After giving birth, she fell into a coma and died 6 days later. Her grieving husband had to be restrained from throwing himself into her grave.
Yeah,
Her
I was
son,
also like on and
Dmitri,
off
was
brand of
one of the
fentanyl at the
conspirators
time.
who murdered Grigory Rasputin in 1916.
Not fentanyl, fucking what was it?
Nicholas was called Greek
I don't know.
Mickey
It was
to
some like
distinguish him from
hyperactive
his cousin,
drug.
the future Tsar Nikolai of Russia. He
And
helped
I
to
was
organize
on
the
that for like
1896 Summer Olympics in Athens.
3 of the 6
Nicholas
months.
married Grand Duchess Elena Vladimirovna of Russia, and they had 3 daughters, Olga, Elizabeth,
I also
and
really
Marina.
just wanted out
He
of
was a talented
school.
painter
Really,
and
really
signed his
badly.
work, Nicholas Le Prince. His father
It's like imagine
bequeathed him
everything
the
you
Royal
do,
Theatre of Greece,
some bitch
which
is
he
mad
in
at
turn
you about
gifted to the Greek state.
the entire
He
time.
died in 1938, aged
And you're just like,
66. Maria was a vivacious
I
child
don't know what
and
I
had
did
a
to you.
deep love of her family's adopted nation. She cried when she discovered that she did
But then
actually
she
have
like
an
is
English
nosy
She
in your
wanted to
business
stay in
after
Greece
you
all of her
graduate high
life
school and
rather than
she
marry a
had to go
foreign
to
prince,
somewhere
and
else.
fell in love with a Greek commoner, but her parents refused to allow the match.
Like
During the
low key
Olympic
to this
Games,
day.
King Alexander I of Serbia proposed to
Like
her,
I'll admit,
but she
I look at
found
her
him
Instagram from
ugly
time to time,
and
but it's also
refused.
to like make
When
sure
she
she
was
doesn't want to
19,
fuck the
her
man I'm
mother's
fucking.
cousin, 32-year-old Grand Duke George
Because she like
Mikhailovich of
tried
Russia,
to date
became
my boyfriend
enamored
when
of
I
her
was
and
dating him,
proposed.
and then
She
did
found
date him,
him
and then
old and dull and turned him
all
down.
really, really
He
weird.
continued to
And
pursue
then
her,
I
visiting
told him
Greece
he was
twice
going
a
to cheat
year
on.
to
I was
propose.
right.
After 5 years, her family pressured her to accept, but she made it clear that she did not love him. The couple moved to Russia and had 2 daughters, Nina and Xenia. Maria and George were devoted to their daughters, but they never grew to love each other. She was also not fond of Russia and spent a great deal of time traveling. During World War I, Maria remained in Britain with her daughters and was close to her aunt, Queen Alexandra, and her cousin, Princess Victoria. Maria founded and ran 2 hospitals to support the war effort. Back in Russia, Grand Duke George was arrested during the revolution. Maria tried desperately to secure his release, but he was shot and killed by the revolutionaries. After the war, Maria returned to her beloved Greece, where she fell in love and married a Greek admiral, Pericles Ioannidis. When Greece became a republic, the couple were forced to flee to Italy, where Maria was content to garden, write, and play backgammon. She died in 1940 at the age of 64 while visiting her beloved Athens. Olga, her
I'll be
mother's
back.
namesake, died at just 7 months of age. Andrew joined the Greek cavalry. While attending the coronation of King Edward VII, he fell in love with Prince Alice of Battenberg, a great-granddaughter of Queen Victoria. The couple wed, settled in Greece, and had 4 daughters, Margarita, Theodora, Cecily, and Sophie, and 1 son, Philip. During World War I, the couple continued to visit the UK, though the British were suspicious that they might be German spies. Andrew served in the Greco-Turkish War, but he disobeyed orders that would have meant certain death for him and his men, in what he considered a desperate attack. When Greece lost the war and revolution broke out, Andrew was arrested, court-martialed, and faced execution. Instead, he was banished from Greece. The family fled to France, where they began to fall apart. Alice suffered a nervous breakdown and was institutionalized. The 4 daughters married German men, several of whom later joined the Nazi Party. And Philip, the youngest, moved to the UK to live with his maternal grandmother. Andrew spent his final years living in the French Riviera with his mistress, French actress Countess Andrée de la Baye, who spent the little money he had left. He died in 1944, age 62. Andrew's son Philip went on to marry the future Queen Elizabeth II of the UK. He is the father of Prince Charles of Wales. Christopher was 20 years younger than his oldest brother, Constantine. He joined the Greek Navy at his parents' insistence, but would have rather been a pianist. The prince was offered 3 different thrones, those of Portugal, Lithuania, and Albania, but he turned them down as he didn't want the stress of being a king. He had an affair with his cousin, Princess Alexandra, Duchess of Fife, a granddaughter of Queen Alexandra of the UK, but their parents disapproved and broke up the romance. In 1920, while the Greek royals were living in exile, Christopher married a millionaire American widow, Nancy Leeds, who was 10 years his senior. Nancy's fortune significantly supported the royals, who had lost most of their wealth along with the crown. Nancy developed cancer and died 3 years into the marriage at the age of 45. 6 years later, Christopher married again to Princess Françoise d'Orléans, daughter of Prince Jean, pretender to the French throne. The couple were childless for a decade and then had one son, Michael, a year before Christopher himself died at the age of 51. The children of Prince Valdemar. Valdemar married Princess Marie of Orléans, an eccentric French aristocrat. The family had a happy and relatively modest life in Copenhagen. Valdemar and Marie were lenient with their 4 sons and daughter, and they were seen as the wild and naughty children compared to their more disciplined cousins. Age joined the Danish army and became a captain. He served in Italy during World War I and fell in love with an Italian aristocrat, Matilda Calvi. He married her without securing permission from his cousin, King Christian X, and therefore had to renounce his title as Prince of Denmark and his place in the line of succession, but was instead given the title of Count of Rosenborg. The couple had one son, Valdemar. In 1918, when Finland won its independence from Russia, Age was a candidate for the King of Finland, but the short-lived crown went instead to German Prince Frederick Charles of Hesse. In 1922, Age joined the French Foreign Legion, an elite division of the French military which was made up mostly of foreign soldiers. He was stationed in Morocco during the Rif War and attained the rank of lieutenant colonel and earned France's highest honor, the Légion d'honneur. Age published a book, A Royal Adventure in the Foreign Legion. He died in Morocco of a lung infection in 1940 at the age of 52. Axel served in the Danish Navy and rose to the rank of admiral. He married his first cousin, Princess Margrethe of Sweden, daughter of Princess Ingeborg. The couple were very much in love, and her mother commented that the pair could not be left alone in a furnished room. The couple were gifted Bernstorffshøj Villa outside of Copenhagen and raised their 2 sons, George and Flemming there. Large parts of the villa were damaged in a fire, and Axel had them rebuilt to resemble a ship. When Axel's father, Prince Valdemar, died in 1939, he inherited the family's estate, but he preferred to remain in his beloved home and allowed the Danish government to utilize the estate on the condition that he and his family would be allowed to be buried on the grounds. During the Nazi occupation of Denmark, Axel joined the resistance, and his home became an important meeting place and arsenal. He was discovered and placed under house arrest for the remainder of the war. Axel served on the International Olympic Committee for 31 years and recommended the official Olympic anthem. He also served as chairman of the board of SAS, the Scandinavian airline system, for 16 years. He died in 1964 at 75. Eric had to renounce his place in the line of succession when he married a Canadian, Louise Frances Booth. Like his older brother, he was granted the title of Count of Rosenborg instead. Eric and Louise had 2 children and divorced after 13 years of marriage. Vico married an American, Eleanor Margaret Green, whom he met in New York City. He also renounced his title of prince and became yet another Count Rosenborg. This is now the honorary title given to all members of the Danish royal family and their children who must renounce their titles of prince or princess. Margaret was the only daughter and baby of the family. When her Lutheran father married her Catholic mother, they had to secure a dispensation from the Pope. Part of the agreement was that their sons would be raised Lutheran and their daughters Catholic, so Margaret was the only child who attended Mass with her mother. She married Prince René of Bourbon-Parma, who was the grandson of King Miguel I of Portugal. The couple had 4 children, Jacques, Anne, Michael, and Andre. Anne married her cousin, King Michael I of Romania, after he abdicated his throne. Margaret died in 1992 at the age of 97 and was the last living grandchild of King Christian IX. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, comment your thoughts, and check out my other royal history videos. If you really want to help, please consider supporting me on Patreon. A link is in the description. Thank you for watching. Queen Elizabeth II of the UK and Commonwealth realms has died after a reign of 70 years, 214 days. Her Majesty passed away at her Balmoral estate in Scotland on the afternoon of September 8, 2022. She was 96 years old. Because of her deterioration of health, her family had been called to her bedside, and she was surrounded by them when she died. Her son Charles is now king, and his wife Camilla has officially been called Queen Consort by the palace. They will remain at Balmoral tonight and return to London in the morning, where the Ascension Council will declare him king and announce what his regal name will be. Elizabeth was the longest reigning monarch in British history and lived near the center of many significant events in the last century. Her life has spanned a world war, the end of the British Empire, 14 British prime ministers, countless social, political, and technological changes, and royal family upheavals. 4 out of 5 Britons were not alive before Elizabeth was queen. Let's take a look at her remarkable life. Elizabeth was born on April 21st, 1926, at the London home of her maternal grandparents. Her father, Prince Albert, Duke of York, known as Bertie, was the second son of King George V, and her mother, Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon, was the daughter of a minor Scottish aristocrat. After a difficult pregnancy, baby Elizabeth had to be delivered by emergency cesarean section, a procedure which was far less common than it is today. Bertie wrote to a cousin about his newborn daughter. She is too delicious and is such a great joy to us both. Elizabeth is progressing wonderfully well and the baby is flourishing. The baby princess was baptized at Buckingham Palace and named Elizabeth after her mother, Alexandra after King George V's mother, who had died 6 months earlier, and Mary after her paternal grandmother, who was Queen Consort at the time. She lived a quiet, happy life with her parents, who preferred to raise her in a flat in London rather than at a royal palace. As a toddler, she had trouble pronouncing her own name, so called herself Lilibet, which remained a pet name within the family. She was especially adored by her grandfather, King George V, whom she affectionately called Grandpa England. At 4, Lilibet was joined by a younger sister, Margaret. She also arrived via cesarean section, and after both difficult deliveries, the Duke and Duchess decided that their family was complete with their 2 cherished daughters. There wasn't much pressure on them to produce a male heir, as at the time everyone assumed that Bertie's older brother, Prince Edward, would marry and someday pass the throne to his own sons. Though King George may have had an inkling of what was to come, he remarked, "I pray to God that my eldest son will never marry and have children, and that nothing will come between Bertie and Lilibet and the throne." Elizabeth and Margaret were educated at home by their mother and governess. At the time, aristocratic girls were not sent to school. The Duchess's own education had ended when she was 13. But despite this limitation, she was a bright and curious woman who read voraciously. She tutored her daughters in history, language, literature, and music. Both girls were doted on by their parents, who presented them with a Pembroke Welsh corgi named Dookie, the first of many pet dogs Elizabeth would adore. Margaret inherited her mother's devotion-winning charm and spontaneity, and became quite a mischief maker. while Elizabeth took after her more reserved, shy, and formal royal side. Winston Churchill said of the 2-year-old princess, "She has an air of authority and reflectiveness astonishing in an infant." Her cousin described her as a jolly little girl, but fundamentally sensible and well behaved. Elizabeth particularly resembled her paternal grandmother in both appearance and temperament. Queen Mary was always more devoted to her royal duties than her children, but she was a far better grandmother than mother. In January 1936, when Elizabeth was 9 years old, her grandfather, King George V, died, and her uncle became King Edward VIII. From the start, the new monarch obstinately refused to take his role seriously. He often left secret government documents lying around his country house for party guests to peruse. Edward was obsessed with an American, Wallis Simpson, who, because she was divorced, would not be accepted as his wife and queen by the government, church, or the British people. Within a year of his ascension, Edward used Wallis as a romantic excuse to give up the job he had always dreaded. He abdicated the throne, left the country, and married Wallis. He never considered or even consulted his younger brother Bertie about dumping the crown on his head. When Bertie told his mother of the abdication, he broke down and sobbed like a child. He was a desperately shy man and suffered a severe stutter. He was worried that he was unequal to the task, but unlike his brother, he had a strong sense of morality and duty, and took up the heavy mantle of monarchy, becoming King George VI. He was crowned in Westminster Abbey on May 12, 1937, the date which had been planned for his brother's coronation. Young Elizabeth thus became the heir presumptive. According to the succession laws of the time, if her parents did have a son, then he would overtake Elizabeth's place in the line to the throne. So, with that slim possibility, she was never officially heir apparent. For this same reason, she was never made Princess of Wales, the traditional title of heir apparent. And she was never made Princess Royal because her aunt, Princess Mary, was holding that title. But within the family, it was now clear that 10-year-old Elizabeth would someday be queen. In 1939, the now royal family of 4 toured the Royal Naval College at Dartmouth. A dashing 18-year-old cadet, Prince Philip of Greece and Denmark, was assigned to escort 13-year-old Princess Elizabeth and her younger sister during the tour. He was their third cousin through Queen Victoria and second cousin through King Christian IX of Denmark. Elizabeth was smitten, and she and Philip began exchanging letters as the young naval officer was shipped off to fight in World War II. Despite their hesitations, George VI and Elizabeth were an exceptional king and queen and became exceedingly popular. During the war, they toured the country extensively, visiting bombed neighborhoods and munitions factories to boost morale. Queen Elizabeth was so revered that Hitler called her the most dangerous woman in Europe. The couple remained in London even after Buckingham Palace was bombed, and they narrowly escaped with their lives. After a Nazi plot to kidnap Princesses Elizabeth
Yes, my
and
eyebrows are
Margaret
long.
was uncovered, the Prime Minister recommended that the girls be evacuated to Canada, but their mother refused, stating, "The children won't go without me. I won't leave without the king, and the king will never leave." They did decide to send the girls to the safer location of Windsor Castle, 25 miles outside of London, and close enough for them to visit their daughters on weekends. Elizabeth and Margaret remained at Windsor for 5 years. The wartime castle was dark and depressing, as was most of the nation, but the princesses did their best to keep up morale. They staged Christmas pantomimes for the local children and raised money for the Queen's Wool Fund, which made warm winter garments for soldiers.
Oh my god, makeup? Really? I do have a pimple on my face, and it kind of looks like a bendy. Do we see this?
She addressed
I don't know what that's about.
other children to be
Anyway.
brave, during terrifying
But oh my
air
god, I
raids and
have makeup on my
evacuations from
face.
their
It's almost
homes.
like I get
At
enjoyment
19,
out of
Elizabeth became
doing
a
it.
driver and mechanic for the Women's Auxiliary Territorial Service, the women's branch of the British military. On May 8, 1945, the Nazis were defeated, and the bloodiest war in human history finally came to an end. Teenage Elizabeth and Margaret were granted permission by their parents to go out on the streets of London incognito and celebrate with the people. Elizabeth recalled later lines of unknown people linking arms and walking down Whitehall, all of us just swept along on the tide of happiness and relief. All this time, Elizabeth had been corresponding with Philip, who was now a lieutenant and a decorated war hero. Once back in the UK, he reconnected with Elizabeth, and their childhood friendship blossomed into a romance. Her parents were not enthusiastic about the match. Philip was a prince without a country. He was a descendant of the Greek royal family, who had been exiled when he was a baby. Though Philip had been raised primarily in the UK by his British grandmother, his 4 sisters had been raised in Germany, and 2 of his brothers-in-law were Nazis. In the summer of 1946, Philip asked the king for his daughter's hand in marriage. George agreed, but requested that the announcement be delayed until Elizabeth's 21st birthday the following April. In the meantime, Philip renounced his Greek and Danish royal titles, converted to Anglicanism, and officially took the surname Mountbatten from his British relatives. To distract their daughter, the king and queen brought her with them on a state visit to South Africa. There, they attempted to promote unity amidst growing tensions between black and white people. During the tour, Princess Elizabeth took the opportunity to give a speech swearing her loyalty to the service of her people. The tour was grueling, and the goal of unity was a failure. A year later, the Afrikaner Nationalist Party took over the country and established apartheid. Around the world, the once vast British Empire was changing, with many former colonies declaring independence. King George accepted with grace the dissolution, relinquishing his various foreign titles of Emperor and King, and taking up the new title of Head of the Commonwealth with pride. Elizabeth and Philip were married in Westminster Abbey on the morning of November 20th, 1947. As Britain was still enduring poverty and rationing after the war, the government advised a low-key wedding. Elizabeth bought the silk for her dress with war ration coupons. But the people were thrilled to have something to celebrate after the many years of hardship. The happy couple spent their honeymoon at Balmoral Castle in Scotland. They brought Elizabeth's corgi, Susan, with them. They then took up residence at Clarence House, the traditional London home of the heir to the throne since King William IV. 6 days before their first anniversary, Elizabeth gave birth to their first child, Charles. King George issued letters patent allowing Elizabeth's children to use the style and title of royal prince or princess. As female line descendants, they were not automatically entitled to this right. Philip was still a naval officer and was posted several times to the British colony of Malta. The couple left Charles with his grandparents and enjoyed some of the most carefree times of their marriage on the Mediterranean island. Elizabeth was free from the pressure of the royal family and able to live a simpler life as the wife of a naval officer, attending beach parties and dances. In 1950, they welcomed their second child, Anne. King George was diagnosed with lung cancer after years of smoking and stress. As his health began to decline, Elizabeth, as his heir, took up more royal duties. These many duties kept Elizabeth away from her children, and young Charles once didn't recognize his mother. She had a nursery train car outfitted so that Charles and Anne could travel with her, at least while she was in Britain. In 1952, it was decided that the king was too ill to undertake an extensive tour of the Commonwealth, so Elizabeth and Philip were sent in his place. George waved his daughter farewell at the airport. went to the Sandringham estate with his wife and daughter Margaret, and died a few days later. In Kenya, Elizabeth and Philip had just returned from a camping trip when word of the king's death reached them. Philip broke the news gently to his wife, who was heartbroken, as the heir automatically ascends the throne upon the death of the monarch. She had already been queen for several hours without knowing it. When asked what her regnal name would be, she replied, Elizabeth, of course. And so she became Elizabeth II, following the 16th century queen of the same name. Both were 25 when their reigns began. Many Scots were unhappy with the title of their new queen, as Scotland had not been united with England until the reign of James I and VI after the death of Elizabeth I. So the new queen was actually the first Queen Elizabeth of Scotland. She returned immediately to the UK to attend her father's funeral and to take up her new role as sovereign. On the 2nd of June 1953, Elizabeth walked into Westminster Abbey, decked in the centuries-old crown jewels and regalia, and took the solemn coronation oath. Hers was the first coronation to be televised and spurred thousands to buy their first TVs. Philip, now officially Prince Consort, organized much of the ceremony. In the UK, the husbands of queens regnant, or queens in their own right, are barred from taking the title king. But Queen Victoria had taken her husband's last name of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. Philip's uncle, Louis Mountbatten, made toast to the new Mountbatten dynasty, but Prime Minister Winston Churchill advised Elizabeth to keep the royal name Windsor. Philip privately complained that he was the only man in the country not allowed to give his name to his own children.
Yeah.
They had a conventional 1950s marriage, and Philip was uncomfortable playing a subordinate role to his wife in public. In compensation, Elizabeth let Philip call the shots when it came to their children, and he was often harsh on Charles. He insisted that his son attend his own alma mater, Gordonston, a Spartan boarding school in northern Scotland. Charles was miserable and bullied there. Queen Elizabeth was soon inundated with the many royal duties demanding her attention. As a constitutional monarch, the government is formed in her name, but she is barred from expressing political opinion publicly. She is still very much involved in the background. She receives daily red boxes filled with reports on the goings-on of the nation, and she meets weekly with the Prime Minister, during which she may advise and warn when necessary. Twice in 1957 and 1963, Elizabeth was required to appoint a Prime Minister, as the Conservative Party had no formal mechanism for electing a leader of its own. Both times she was criticized for her choice, and the party has since amended their practices to keep the Queen above politics. Following the coronation,
I'm gonna go get my
Elizabeth
toast.
and Philip embarked on a 7-month tour of the Commonwealth. Elizabeth became the face of the Commonwealth around the world, and not just on stamps. With the jet age, she has been able to go to dozens of countries in person on state visits. She is the head of state of the 16 nations in the Commonwealth realms. The realms are part of the Commonwealth of Nations, a political affiliation of 53 nations, former British colonies who do not all recognize the Queen as head of state. The Queen was discouraged from visiting Ghana in 1961, as her host, President Kwame Nkrumah, was a target of assassination. Elizabeth dismissed fears for her own safety and went on the trip anyway, winning over Ghana and preventing Nkrumah from allying with the Soviet Union and giving them a foothold in Africa. The Queen continued to have a close but complex relationship with her sister, Margaret. She wished to marry Peter Townsend, a divorcee 16 years her senior. Elizabeth was head of the Church of England, which did not permit divorcees to remarry, so she continuously put off granting her sister permission to marry, until Margaret had no choice but to give Townsend up. Margaret later married a more acceptable match for photographer Anthony Armstrong Jones, whom the Queen created Earl of Snowdon. The couple had a tumultuous relationship, and Elizabeth was often a surrogate mother and steadying force to her nephew David and niece Sarah. Elizabeth and Philip had their own rough patch in the late 1950s. In 1956, Philip went on a tour without his wife aboard the Royal Yacht Britannia, during which he opened the 1956 Summer Olympic Games in Australia. Rumors of infidelity followed the prince, but by 1960, a decade after the birth of Princess Anne, the couple had patched things up and added to their family with the birth of Prince Andrew. Prince Edward followed in 1964. In 1966, a mining disaster in the Welsh village of Aberfan cost the lives of 144 people, most of them children. Prince Philip visited the village the next day, but the Queen hesitated for a week. She feared that her visit would distract from recovery efforts, but her lack of response was considered callous and is now one of the biggest regrets of her reign. In 1969, the Queen's eldest child, Charles, was invested as Prince of Wales in a fanciful ceremony at Carnarvon Castle. The 1970s and 80s were difficult decades for the monarchy. For 1,000 years, the institution had, for the most part, been treated with great respect. But as the nation experienced a devastating recession, more and more Britons were questioning the place of the archaic monarchy in the modern world. Punk band the Sex Pistols released the song God Save the Queen, a searing criticism of Her Majesty, in 1977 during her Silver Jubilee celebration. Despite being banned on BBC Radio, the song became a huge hit and reached number 2 on the UK singles chart. In 1981, while riding her horse during her birthday at Trooping of the Colours, Elizabeth was shot at 6 times at close range. She was shot at again in New Zealand a few months later. In 1982, the Queen woke up to find a strange man in her bedroom at Buckingham Palace. After a short chat with the man, she called for security. Throughout the 70s, Prince Charles had an affair with a vivacious young woman named Camilla, but it became clear that the royal family would not accept a marriage between them. Camilla wasn't from the right sort of family. Royals pressured her to marry her old boyfriend, Andrew Parker Bowles. But she and the prince continued an on-off relationship, even as Charles married the woman hand-picked for him, Diana Spencer. She was demure and beautiful, a fairy tale princess, but the public didn't see the unhappiness in her marriage until later. On her honeymoon, Charles was more interested in reading than in his new bride. He tried to stay away from Camilla at first, but they rekindled their affair. The Queen had very little sympathy for her lonely daughter-in-law. As she had been born into royalty, she couldn't relate to how difficult it was for Diana to transition from a private life to constant royal duties and media scrutiny. Diana became incredibly popular with the people, both for her glamour and for her charity work. So as the unhappiness of their marriage was exposed, Charles and Camilla got the blame. That same year, in 1992, 2 of the Queen's other children split up with their partners. Princess Anne's husband, Mark Phillips, was discovered to have fathered a child by another woman, and Anne's love letters to another man were published. Prince Andrew's marriage to Sarah Ferguson also hit the rocks. Sarah was unhappy being left alone for months at a time while Andrew served as a naval pilot. Again, the Queen couldn't sympathize, as her time as a naval wife had been the happiest of her life. Sarah was photographed sunbathing topless while her financial manager sucked her toes, and the marriage ended soon after. The Queen called 1992 her annus horribilis, or horrible year, because on top of all the drama with children, her favorite home and namesake, Windsor Castle, caught fire and was partially destroyed. When it was announced that taxpayers would foot the repair bills, the public was outraged. The The queen was already exempt from paying tax on her massive fortune, on top of receiving millions of pounds a year from the government. The queen finally conceded that she would pay income tax and pay allowances to minor royals from her own pocket.
There's so many
The
crumbs on
amount
my
of taxable
chair.
funds the British royals receive, how much private wealth they actually have, and what political influence they may have used to protect it
Yeah.
remain controversial. In 1997, Diana was killed in a car crash in Paris while being chased by paparazzi. At the time, Elizabeth was on holiday at Balmoral Castle with her grandsons, William and Harry. The outpouring of grief around the world was enormous, but was met with silence from the Queen, who remained hidden for over a week. She was more concerned with supporting her grandsons who had just lost their mother, but her lack of public response was seen as cold-hearted and out of touch. In 2002, Elizabeth celebrated her Golden Jubilee, marking 50 years on the throne. Later that year, she lost both her mother at 101 and her sister Margaret at 71. In 2005, Charles was finally able to marry the woman he had loved all along, Camilla. Charles's eldest son, Prince William, married university friend and commoner Catherine Middleton. Their glamorous wedding and popularity have gone a long way to win back the hearts of the public. Just before the birth of their first child, a new Succession to the Crown Act was
Not
passed,
great. I
changing
spilled
her
a
male
shit ton of
preference
coffee on
primogeniture
me,
to absolute primogeniture,
and I burnt
which
myself.
gives daughters
Like my whole
equal
thumb.
importance to sons.
And
in
then I
line
had to take
succession.
my dirty, unwashed
Prince
hands because
Andrew
it's
came
very
under
early in the
fire
morning.
for
Why
his
would I wash my
friendship
hands
with
at
sex
6 in the
trafficker
morning?
Jeffrey Epstein,
Go in my
and was accused
fridge.
of having sex with an underage girl.
Gross.
He has since
Get
been
aloe
asked to
vera.
step out
I
of the
spilt
public
it
eye
on
and has
the
given
counter,
up all of his charity
and then I had to
donations.
scoop it and put it
Charles's
on my
second
thumb
son,
because
Harry, announced that
I-
he and his wife,
I felt like I
American
didn't have
actress
skin.
Meghan Markle, would be stepping down as senior members of the royal family. Their
That's how my
exclusive
morning's
interview
been.
with Oprah Winfrey carefully praised the Queen, but accusations of racism and ignoring Meghan's distressed mental health were levied against unnamed members of the royal family. On April 9, 2021, Prince Philip, the Queen's husband and companion of 73 years, died just 2 months shy of his 100th birthday. He was laid to rest at Windsor Castle. Despite the many scandals among the British royal family, the 96-year-old
So that
Queen
happened.
remained
I'm also
popular,
on my
though
period
she had a
and in
reputation
quite a
for
bit of pain.
formality and
So
stiff
I
upper
went to the
lip.
bathroom,
She
changed my
was
pad, had to take my
renowned
unwashed
for
hands
personal
out of my
touch
fridge,
and her
get
good
aloe
sense of
vera,
humor.
spill aloe
She
vera,
was also noted for her
and
brightly
then
colored
have to
outfits
scoop it
and
onto
matching
my
hats.
hands. I think
This
I
was a
ate aloe
fashion
vera
she
because my
adopted
mouth's
from
swollen
her
up.
mother, who felt that she should be easy to spot in the crowd. In 2022, Elizabeth celebrated her 70-year Platinum Jubilee. Queen Elizabeth died peacefully on the afternoon of September 8,
That's how my day's
2022,
going.
surrounded by her family.
Not great.
The United Kingdom and Commonwealth realms now has a new king. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, comment your thoughts, and check out my other royal history videos. If you really want to help, please consider supporting me on Patreon. A link is in the description. Thank you for watching. Queens of the world. Queen Mary I of England. Born a princess, Mary was declared illegitimate by her father when he divorced her mother in his desperate attempts to father a male heir. When her brother died, he passed her over and named their cousin Queen instead. But the people supported her. Go to London and had her usurper beheaded. Now the first she undid her father and brother's work to save the nation from Catholicism. She burnt Protestants at the stake and earned the name Bloody Mary. Desperate for a child, she made an unpopular marriage with a man who didn't care for her and suffered 2 She died at 42, passing the throne to her sister, who overshadowed her for the rest of history. Henry VIII was only the second Tudor king of England. His father, Henry VII, had defeated King Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth and taken the crown with a somewhat shaky genealogical claim. But Henry was proving to be a powerful king and was cementing his place on the throne with the help of his beautiful and intelligent wife, Catherine of Aragon. She was the daughter of another power couple, Isabel I of Castile and Fernando II of Aragon, who set in motion the unification of Spain, began the Spanish Inquisition, and launched Christopher Columbus's expedition to the New World. Catherine herself had ridden into battle
Yeah,
while
I'm not
pregnant
having a great day.
King James IV of Scotland. Henry and Catherine were
Honestly,
very much in
I'm
love
thinking about
and
germs
had
that
personalities and
aren't there.
popularity to launch a legendary royal dynasty. But in order to have a dynasty, they needed to have children. And so far, the couple had found only tragedy in reproduction. Their first child, a daughter, came too early and was stillborn. Their second, Prince Henry, was celebrated across the country and given the title Duke of Cornwall, but he died after just 52 days of life from an intestinal malady. Two more stillborn sons followed. After 6 years
I
of
do.
marriage,
It
Catherine went
should
into
be basically the same
confinement.
exact thing on
Hope was high,
here.
as always, that a healthy baby boy
Let
would
me
be
bring
delivered
it
to
up.
carry on the Tudor
Yeah, it's
dynasty.
really just
And
mifa
on
spelled like on
February
here,
18,
and then underscore, and then
1516,
woff
the Queen gave
spelled like
birth
it is
to a
on here.
living, healthy child.
And then
The
here's my
king,
Instagram.
queen, and all the kingdom rejoiced. But there was one thing which slightly dampened the celebrations. The baby
Here's
was
my
a girl.
latest post.
Despite her mother and
This is a
grandmother's
photo from a few
dynamism,
weeks ago, and I
neither
realized I've been
Henry
doing
nor
this
any of his medieval
a
courtiers
lot, so I was like, I'm
believed
gonna
that a
save
woman
them all
was
from my
capable of ruling the nation. The
and
only
post
queen
them.
who had ever tried to claim the throne of England was Matilda. Her reign led to civil war, and her crown was stolen by her cousin, Stephen. Henry VIII didn't have any brothers to follow him in succession, so to him, having a son was absolutely imperative.
And then here's a
He
post
comforted his wife
from
by reminding
last
her
month.
that they were still young, and she had many
okay.
years to give him healthy sons.
Look how
Besides,
pretty my hair
daughters could
was.
be incredibly valuable to a king by serving as bargaining chips on the European marriage market. The baby was baptized Mary after her father's favorite sister, who had briefly been Queen of France. As was customary, the princess was raised away from her parents. She had her own household with dozens of servants, women to rock her enormous cradle 24 hours a day, and even her own laundress. Henry VIII's cousin, Margaret Pole, the Countess of Salisbury, was appointed to be her governess and was the central mother figure of Mary's childhood. But her parents did visit her often. At 2, Mary was betrothed to the 6-month-old Dauphin of France, son of King Francis I. The prince was too young to travel, so the betrothal ceremony was done by proxy, with the French admiral standing in for the groom. The toddler princess went up to him and asked, "Are you the Dauphin? If so, I want to kiss you." Mary was a precocious child. At 4, she entertained the French ambassador with a performance
I
of
will be back.
virginals. Her father bragged that his daughter never cried. By the time she was 6, relations with France had fallen apart, and Mary was betrothed for the second time to her mother's nephew, Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. He was 22 when the alliance was negotiated, but after a few years he decided that he couldn't wait for his child's fiancée to grow up to start building his own dynasty. So he cordially broke off the betrothal and wed Isabella of Portugal, who was closer to his own age. Queen Catherine took great interest in her only child's education. She commissioned Spanish humanist Juan Luis Neves to write a treatise on the education of Christian girls. Other noble mothers followed the queen's lead, and for a generation, aristocratic girls were educated far more than they ever had been before. Mary was a serious child and studied diligently. She could read and write in Latin by the age of 9. She studied French, Spanish and Greek and learned to play music and dance beautifully. She was a credit to her father, who doted on her. After all, she was his spitting image. She had a fair complexion with ruddy cheeks and Tudor reddish gold hair. He declared publicly that Princess Mary was his rightful heir. At 9, he sent her to Ludlow Castle, the traditional seat of the Prince of Wales, though Mary was never officially invested with the title traditionally given to the heir apparent, as Henry was still holding out hope that he would have a son. By now, Queen Catherine was 40 and had not become pregnant in 7 years. Henry had fathered an illegitimate son, Henry Fitzroy, by his mistress, Bessie Blount, so he felt confident that the fertility problems were his wife's. He asked her to retire to a convent and allow him to remarry. Had Catherine agreed, Mary would have remained legitimate and in the line of succession, but the Queen refused to give up her place. Henry obsessed over a biblical passage from Leviticus, which states that it is a sin to marry your brother's widow, and that such a couple would be childless. Catherine's first husband had been Henry's older brother Arthur, but he had died at 15, and Catherine swore that their marriage had never been consummated. She also argued that their marriage was not childless. They had married. Henry asked the Pope for an annulment, but he was under siege from the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, Catherine's nephew, so he refused. Henry VIII did not like to hear no, and he was infatuated with a new woman, Anne Boleyn, whom he was confident would give him his son and heir. With the help of Anne's chaplain, Thomas Cranmer, whom he appointed Archbishop of Canterbury, Henry used the Protestant movement to make himself head of the new Church of England. He dissolved the monasteries and enriched himself by looting their wealth, much to the horror of his devout wife.
Hi.
In 1531, she was banished from court, and her rooms and jewels were given to Anne. Catherine went to Windsor to be with Mary, who had been suffering depression and frequent illness, likely due to anxiety about her and her mother's precarious position. After spending one last summer together, mother and daughter would never see each other again. In 1533, Henry married Anne, who was pregnant with his child. The king required everyone to swear the oath of supremacy, that he was the one supreme head of the church, that his marriage to Catherine of Aragon was invalid, was illegitimate. Those who refused to swear were executed. This included the woman who raised Mary, Countess Margaret Pole. She refused to kneel on the scaffold, saying, "So should traitors do, and die a nun." When the executioner raised his axe, she ran. He chased her all around the scaffold and finally hacked her to death. Mary was downgraded from princess to the Lady Mary. Her servants were dismissed, and she was sent to wait on her new baby half-sister, Elizabeth. Despite the danger, the 17-year-old refused to swear the oath of supremacy. She was her father's daughter, after all, and was just as headstrong as he. Father and daughter sent many furious letters to one another and didn't see each other for 3 years. When Henry went to visit Elizabeth, he refused to see Mary. Queen Anne Boleyn would not allow her stepdaughter at court. As punishment for their obstinance, the king refused to allow Catherine and Mary to see each other. Faithful servants secreted letters between them, but Catherine died of cancer at the age of 50, and Mary was inconsolable. Henry forbade her to attend her mother's funeral. After 3 years, Anne Boleyn angered Henry by failing to deliver a son. He had her arrested on false charges of adultery and incest and beheaded. Princess Elizabeth was also declared illegitimate and removed from the succession. 2 weeks later, Henry married wife number 3, Jane Seymour. She had been a maid of honor to Queen Catherine, and she felt kindly towards Mary. She urged the king to make peace with his eldest daughter, and he agreed if she would swear the oath of supremacy. Mary wrote to her father that she would submit to to his authority as far as God and my conscience permitted. But Henry sent men to bully her, even threatening to beat her to death. Finally, she signed a document agreeing to all of her father's demands. Now that he had his way, Henry welcomed his daughter back at court and allowed her fine clothes, an allowance, and to return to her household, including her closest friend, Susan Clarencieux. During these happy years, Mary became a fashion trendsetter and enjoyed playing music and gambling at cards. Rebels in the north of England rose up against Henry's active supremacy, and one of their demands was that Mary be made legitimate. The Pilgrimage of Grace was ruthlessly suppressed, and the rebels hanged. In 1537, Queen Jane finally gave birth to a son, Edward, to secure Henry's dynasty. She died 12 days later of childbed fever. Mary was made godmother to her half-brother and acted as chief mourner at Queen Jane's funeral. Mary, now 23, was past her prime in the Tudor marriage market, but her tenuous position and lack of a title made her matrimonial prospects challenging. Duke Philip of Bavaria courted her, but his suit fell through. A potential alliance was negotiated between Mary and William, Duke of Cleves, who were about the same age. But when King Henry saw a portrait of the Duke's sister Anne, he decided that their marriage should be the one in the treaty instead. Once the king saw the German princess in person, he was less impressed. She agreed to an annulment, and Henry left her with an estate, a fortune, and her head still attached to her neck. The king's fifth wife, 16-year-old Catherine Howard, wasn't so lucky. She was found guilty of adultery and beheaded at the Christmas festival of 1542. While her father was without a queen, Mary acted as hostess. Henry had his eye on one of his daughters, ladies-in-waiting, Catherine Parr, whom he made his sixth and final wife. She urged him to reconcile with both his daughters. The family grew closer than ever before, and both Mary and Elizabeth were added back into the succession, after their brother, of course. But they remained legally illegitimate and without the title of princess. In 1547, Henry VIII died at the age of 55. He left his eldest daughter a wealthy woman, with estates in Norfolk, Suffolk, and Essex, many of which had previously belonged to the Boleyn family. She felt maternally towards the new king, her 9-year-old brother, Edward VI. A regency council ruled in his name, headed by his maternal uncle Edward Seymour, and populated by devout Protestants. Though Henry had made his people reject the Pope and swear that he was the head of the church, he was still basically a practicing Catholic and did little to reform the church. But Edward's council passed a number of laws banning the Catholic Mass and ensuring all churches in their land performed Protestant rites in English. Mary was not raised to be especially devout, but out of loyalty to her mother and in defiance of those who had pulled her from her rightful place, she remained faithful to Roman Catholicism and celebrated Mass 4 times a day in her own chapel. The common people were not enthusiastic about their forced conversion, and it looked very bad that such a high-profile person was openly defying the king. Edward argued frequently with his sister over her refusal to convert. She asked her cousin, Emperor Charles V, to apply diplomatic pressure so that she would be allowed to practice her religion. He even sent ships to rescue her from England, but she wasn't keen to leave her wealth behind. At the Christmas celebrations of 1550, the 13-year-old king brought both his sister and himself to tears in front of the whole court by reproving her for ignoring his religious laws. Would you like to explore castles, archaeological sites, and museums with me while we nerd out about our favorite topics in history? Then join me on my historic group tour of Scotland from May 15th to 21st, 2024. Over 7 days, we'll experience the highlights of Scotland Scottish history, from lowlands to highlands. We'll see the honours of Scotland at Edinburgh Castle, Bronze Age burial chambers at Balnurin Aclaba, Eileandonnan Castle, the Living History Highlands Folk Museum, Dunkeld Cathedral, the mystical Isle of Skye, and so much more. We'll try delicacies and unwind over a whiskey tasting. And most amazingly of all, we'll do it all with a group of fellow history lovers and a local guide. There are only a few spots left, so click the link in the description to reserve yours today. The last day to book this once-in-a-lifetime trip will be March 25th. I can't wait to meet you in Scotland. At 15, King Edward fell seriously ill with a lung infection, or possibly tuberculosis. He was determined that the crown should not go to his sister, as she would surely undo his religious reforms. His second sister, Elizabeth, was Protestant, but as both sisters had been declared illegitimate, he could not disinherit one and not the other. So he signed a new will, handing the throne to his next nearest relative, his cousin, 16-year-old Lady Jane Grey. Mary was summoned to court to visit her dying brother, but she was warned that the summons was a trap meant to capture her and prevent her from claiming the throne. Mary fled to East Anglia, where she knew that many Catholic people would be loyal to her. When Edward's death was announced, she wrote to the Privy Council demanding that she be proclaimed queen per her father's will. Jane Grey was declared queen by the council instead. With the might of the Tower of London's arsenal behind her, Jane's victory seemed all but assured. But the council underestimated the people's loyalty to Mary. They felt the throne had been stolen from her illegally. As Mary marched towards London, she gathered an army of 20,000 ragtag supporters. The council had to pay double to raise just 3,000 men to fight for Jane. The battle was lost before it was fought. The counselors who had put young Jane in this perilous position abandoned her and swore loyalty to Mary. Jane was arrested and imprisoned in the Tower. Her reign ended after only 9 days. Mary, accompanied by her half-sister Elizabeth, rode triumphantly into London on August 3rd, 1553, on a wave of popular support. She was now the first unquestioned Queen Regnant of England. She kept Jane Grey locked up in the Tower, but she understood that her cousin had been a political pawn and didn't want to execute her. Mary's first acts as queen were to appoint Susan Clarencieux Mistress of the Robes and release a number of imprisoned Catholics. She issued a proclamation that she would not compel her subjects to follow her religion, but within months she ordered the arrest of a number of prominent Protestants. Her first parliament declared her parents' marriage valid and herself legitimate, abolished Edward VI's religious laws, and made peace with the Pope. Mary also brought back the heresy laws her father had overturned, which allowed those who went against the Catholic faith to be burned at the stake. The 37-year-old queen turned her attention to finding a husband and producing an heir to keep her Protestant sister Elizabeth off the throne. A number of English gentlemen came forward as suitors, but the queen wanted to wed a fellow royal. Her former fiancé, Emperor Charles V, suggested she marry his only son, Prince Philip, who was heir to vast territories in Europe and the New World. This portrait of him was sent to the queen, and she became infatuated with the 26-year-old prince. The marriage was very unpopular. According to English law, a wife's possessions and titles rightfully belonged to her husband, and the English did not want to be swallowed up by the vast Habsburg Empire. When Mary insisted on wedding her dashing cousin, rebellions broke out. One in particular, Wyatt's Rebellion, counted Jane Grey's father among its leaders and aimed to put Jane back on the throne. Mary faced the fact that as long as her cousin remained alive, she would continue to inspire insurrection. So she had the 17-year-old 9 days queen beheaded.
Why?
Princess Elizabeth was also implicated in the rebellion plot. She
I'm
was
not going to
interrogated
tell
and
This is what she
imprisoned
does.
in the
She
Tower
knows
of
I can't
London.
hear her, so
Mary
she sits
didn't
there and
trust
she
her
knocks,
sister,
and
who
I'm
was
doing
also a
something,
rallying
and all I
point
see is
for
her
Protestants.
like
She let
this
her out of the tower
in the
after
back
2
of my
months,
mirror,
but kept her
and
under
it
house
scares
arrest
the
for
shit
2
out of me
months.
every time.
Philip finally
And she just
arrived
thinks
in
it's
England
so
with an
funny.
impressive entourage of 70 ships and 1,000 followers. 2 days later, on July 25th,
Sushi, you're gonna
1864,
get stuck,
couple
and you
were
know
wed at
this.
Winchester Cathedral. Mary was quite taken with her charming young groom. Philip, on the other hand, had no interest in his bride, aside from the political advantages the marriage brought. He became King of England. Parliament was called and documents were signed in both of
I
their
spilled a
names.
whole coffee cup's
Coins were
worth of
minted
coffee on
with
my
both
hand.
of their faces. But England was not obliged to provide military support
What's
to his
up?
father, and
Trash.
Philip could not act without his wife's consent or appoint foreigners
Really
to
not
office
have
in
like
England.
anything.
To elevate his son to Mary's rank, Emperor Charles granted Philip the crown of Naples, as well as his claim to the kingdom of Jerusalem. Mary thus became Queen of Naples and Jerusalem. Philip could not speak English, so he and Mary conversed in a mixture of Spanish, French, and Latin. 2 months after the wedding,
When you
the
being
Queen
so
stopped
weird, she
menstruating.
kept like
She
half going
gained
under
weight
the
and
chair
felt
yesterday and was like,
nauseated in the
I
mornings.
wonder what's under
She
here.
was thrilled
Like,
when her
there was
doctors
very
assured
pressure.
her that she was pregnant. Of
Is there
course, they were not permitted to give Her Majesty a physical
There's the bird.
examination.
Hi, bird.
Philip and Susan Clarencieux both expressed doubts that the Queen
It's
was
on the
really
outside,
a
actually.
child. Parliament
You need a
passed
power
an
wash
act
the window.
making Philip regent
It's
in
bad.
the event of Mary's
It's not
death
down
and
here.
childbirth.
It's all
In
up there where
April,
the rain
Elizabeth was
catches.
released from house arrest
So
and
it's
called
stains
to
from
court
the
to
rain.
witness the birth, which was
So if you could
expected
please
to be
deal with that, because
imminent.
I've tried to wipe
But
it off.
as the
It's on the
10th and
outside.
11th months ticked by,
Hi guys.
signs
Oh,
of labor,
Sushi.
rumors flew.
Wedding.
An ambassador wrote that the Queen's pregnancy
Sushi was like, why are
was
you
likely
walking
to
here?
end
And then she
in wind
hit her.
rather than anything else. One nervous doctor assured Mary that
Like
boys
your
took
sister.
longer
She
to
left
womb.
me.
By July, her swollen belly began to recede. She probably suffered a psychosomatic episode induced by her overwhelming desire to have a
I'm back.
child. Following the humiliation of her false pregnancy, Philip left her to wage war on the continent. Heartbroken, Mary fell into a deep depression. She considered the episode God's punishment for her having tolerated heretics in her realm. Mary ordered 3 prominent Protestants to be publicly burned at the stake. One of them was Thomas Cranmer, who had facilitated the Act of Supremacy and her parents' divorce so many years ago. She named Reginald Pole, the son of her executed governess, Margaret, the new Archbishop of Canterbury. 800 rich Protestants fled the country. Those who remained became targets of persecution. Local governments used the heresy laws to burn men, women, and even children who were called out by their neighbors in a witch hunt atmosphere. Altogether, 280 Protestants were burned at the stake, gaining Mary a great deal of hatred and the nickname Bloody Mary. But for some perspective, her father had an estimated 57,000 people executed during his reign. Elizabeth I too executed many hundreds of people, including her own cousin, Mary, Queen of Scots. Over in Europe, Emperor Charles V had abdicated and made his son King Philip II of Spain and ruler of the vast Spanish Empire, though the Holy Roman Empire went to his brother, Ferdinand I. Mary wrote to her husband, begging him to return. He did so, only to request she supply him with troops for his war with France. She was willing to do anything to please him, so she agreed and was rewarded with the loss of Calais, the last English possession in France. The defeat humiliated Mary. From then on, English monarchs could no longer call themselves rulers of France, but they did anyway. On top of all that, the English economy was in poor condition. Years of wet weather led to bad harvests, and the wool trade had dried up. The English had hoped to get involved in Spain's profitable trade in the New World, but Spanish merchants jealously guarded their routes, and Mary, not wanting to upset her darling husband, didn't push the issue. The Queen did hear daily reports on the state of her kingdom, and was far more involved in governing than her father had ever been. She took actions to improve the lives of her people. She promoted education and introduced economic policies which were beginning to have a positive effect. But she didn't live long enough to get the credit for any of her beneficial changes. Elizabeth was implicated in yet another plot to
18.
overthrow Mary, but Philip asked his wife to spare her sister's life. He had other plans with his sister-in-law. Within a few months, Philip left again, and Mary once more believed that she was pregnant. She had a swollen belly and other symptoms. Once again, the months ticked by with no signs of labor, and the Queen's belly receded. But this time, there was a more sinister cause
I need to pee and get this.
than her own desperate desire for a child. Queen Mary had uterine or ovarian cancer. Weakened by the disease, the Queen was also struck by an influenza pandemic which was sweeping through Europe. Desperately ill and confined to her bed, she faced reality and named her younger sister, Elizabeth, as her heir. Queen Mary I died in her sleep on November 17, 1558, at the age of 42. Elizabeth, now queen, spent the modern equivalent of $2 million to bury her sister in Westminster Abbey in an elaborate funeral. Philip, who did not attend, wrote, "I felt a reasonable regret for her death. Before his wife was even dead, he sent a proposal of marriage to Elizabeth, but she rejected him." 30 years later, Philip attempted to invade England with the might of the Spanish Armada, but Elizabeth won an unlikely victory and sent him packing. Queen Elizabeth I reigned for 45 years of economic and artistic success in England. Her legacy far outshines that of her older sister, who has since been popularly vilified with a heavy helping of misogyny as both bloodthirsty and fierce, and spineless and weak. While perhaps not the most brilliant queen England ever had, historians are now re-examining Mary's life through the lens of her popularity with the common people and the successes she did have in spite of the constraints set on women of the time and her premature death. Elizabeth was buried on top of Mary in Westminster Abbey, and the following inscription was placed on their shared tomb: "Consorts in realm and tomb, we sisters Elizabeth and Mary here lie in sleep in hope of the resurrection." If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, comment your thoughts, and check out my other royal history videos. Thank you for watching. Commoner Queens of England. The United Kingdom has a new king and a new queen consort, Camilla. She is only the 9th queen consort of England in its 1,000-year history to actually be English, and only the 6th to have been born a commoner. In fact, she is England's first commoner queen consort in 475 years, since Henry VIII died in 1547 and his final wife, Catherine Parr, was downgraded to Queen Dowager. Since the Norman Conquest in 1066, English and British royals have almost exclusively married other royals, usually as part of treaties with powerful neighboring nations. Of the 43 royal consorts, consorts. 13 have been French, 8 German, 5 Spanish, 4 Danish, 1 Dutch, 1 Italian, 1 Portuguese, and 1 Scottish. Political alliances came first, and sometimes love would follow. But on a few rare occasions, an English monarch put his heart or his lust before his head and chose instead to make an English woman his queen. There have been 9 English queens in England. 1 was a member of a rival branch of the English royal family. 2 were from noble families, and 6 were commoners. Let's meet them. Elizabeth Woodville was born in 1437 in the midst of the Wars of the Roses, a multi-generational conflict between the York and Lancaster factions of the English royal family. She was the child of a socially unequal marriage. Her father was a member of the landed gentry, the medieval middle class, while her mother, Jacquetta, was the daughter of the Duke of Luxembourg. Elizabeth was called the most beautiful woman in the island of Britain. She was also charming and had a keen intellect. At 15, she married Sir John Grey, and they had 2 sons, Thomas and Richard, before he was killed fighting for the Lancastrians in the Wars of the Roses. According to legend, Elizabeth's mother-in-law kept her inheritance from her and left her destitute. Desperate to provide for her sons, she waited under an oak tree where she knew the king would be hunting, and when she saw him, she approached, pled her case, and asked King Edward IV to aid her in her dispute. He did her one better by falling in love with her on sight and marrying her in secret at the nearby home of her family. Edward had his new bride crowned queen in Westminster Abbey. She was dressed head to ankle in royal purple, and she walked into the abbey barefoot under a purple silk canopy. Elizabeth became the first English queen consort of England since the early Anglo-Saxon queens prior to 1066. King Edward's right-hand man, the Earl of Warwick, was at the time busy negotiating a political marriage for the king with a French princess. When he learned that Edward had married a Lancastrian commoner, he was furious. Even more so when Edward granted his new bride's relatives plum appointments and marriages, ensconcing them in the upper echelons of society. Elizabeth's 20-year-old brother married a 60-year-old wealthy widow, causing considerable scandal. Edward's choice of Elizabeth as his bride might have been a romantic impulse, but it could also have been part of a political master plan. For a king embroiled in a civil war, alliance with foreign powers wasn't nearly as important as securing his position at home. By marrying an Englishwoman and appointing her family to prominent positions, he filled his treacherous government with people he knew would be loyal to him. But playing favorites was a dangerous game. Warwick's outrage grew. He accused the queen's mother, Jacquetta, of witchcraft and rose up in rebellion against the king. He briefly defeated Edward and sent him on the run in France. During his exile, Queen Elizabeth sought sanctuary in Westminster Abbey with her 3 young daughters. There she gave birth to Edward's first son, future Edward V. Within a year, the king returned and killed Warwick in battle. Elizabeth and Edward had 10 children together during their 19-year marriage. Edward was very fond of his wife, and she held a good deal of influence with him. He was, however, notoriously unfaithful and fathered several illegitimate children. Edward died suddenly, possibly of pneumonia at the age of 40, leaving his 12-year-old son the throne and naming his brother Richard as regent. Elizabeth and the Woodvilles didn't trust Richard. They attempted to protect young King Edward from his uncle, but Richard seized the king and his younger brother and locked them up in the Tower of London. He claimed this was for their protection, but they would never be seen again. Queen Elizabeth returned to sanctuary at Westminster Abbey to protect her other children. Conveniently, Uncle Richard uncovered a priest who swore that Edward IV had been betrothed to another young woman before he married Elizabeth, thus making their marriage unlawful and their children illegitimate. He had himself crowned King Richard III, and he probably had the two young princes in the Tower murdered. Devastated by the loss of her sons, Elizabeth, now stripped of her property and title as Dowager Queen, focused on destroying King Richard. His consort, Anne Neville, also hailed from a non-royal family. She was the daughter of the Earl of Warwick, so not exactly a commoner. She and Richard had been childhood sweethearts, but when her father rebelled against King Edward, he instead chose to back King Henry VI's only son, Edward, Prince of Wales, and wed 14-year-old Anne to him to seal the deal. The prince was killed in battle alongside Anne's father. Anne and her older sister, Isabel, inherited his vast estate. Isabel's husband wanted to keep the cash for himself, so he hid teenage Anne in a London cook shop, disguised as a servant to prevent her from ever marrying. But Richard was so keen to wed her that he forfeited her fortune in order to learn where she was hidden. As Richard was a younger brother of a king who already had sons of his own, he was not expected to inherit the throne. Therefore, it was not unusual for him to marry an English noblewoman rather than a foreign princess. But when the couple unexpectedly became king and queen, her sudden elevation to royalty ruffled many English feathers. Anne enjoyed the throne for less than 2 years before she died of tuberculosis at 28. Widowed King Richard considered marrying his niece, Elizabeth of York, the daughter of Edward IV and Elizabeth Woodville, but the former queen was having none of it. She secretly allied with Margaret Beaufort and supported her son Henry Tudor's claim to the throne. The ladies plotted to improve their claims by uniting their houses. Elizabeth of York, now with no living brothers, was the heiress of the House of York. She was betrothed to Margaret's son Henry, thus uniting the houses of York and Lancaster once and for all. In 1485, Henry Tudor defeated and killed Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth. He was named King Henry VII. Elizabeth Woodville, restored to her title of Dowager Queen, was present at the birth of her grandson, the future King Henry VIII. She died at 55. Henry VIII inherited the throne from his father at 18. He fulfilled his royal duty with a powerful and lasting marriage to Catherine of Aragon, daughter of the monarchs of Spain. But after 15 years of marriage, Catherine had given birth to only one surviving child, a daughter, Mary. Being only the second Tudor king, Henry was obsessed with fathering a son to secure his dynasty. When Catherine entered menopause, Henry decided to replace her. Henry mounted a 7-year legal battle, arguing that as Catherine had previously been wed to his older brother, Arthur, their union was incestuous and should be annulled. But Catherine swore that her first marriage had never been consummated. Henry grew fed up with appealing to the Pope, so he used the Protestant movement to make himself head of the new Church of England and granted himself an annulment. Considering the diplomatic minefield the royal feud had created and the questionable legality of Henry's next marriage while his first wife was still alive, negotiating for the hand of a foreign princess would have been nearly impossible. But Henry wasn't interested in women or their treaties. His wandering eye had caught on a lady much closer to home. Anne Boleyn was the daughter of the English ambassador to France. She wasn't considered especially beautiful, but she had grown up on the continent and possessed an abundance of style and sophistication. Her charming and dazzling personality enchanted the king. She and Henry shared a love of hunting, dancing, and playing music. At first, she resisted Henry's advances. She hoped to marry a gentleman of her own status, rather than become yet another mistress of the king, as so many ladies rejection only fueled the king's ardor, and
Hi.
eventually she relented and agreed to sleep with him if he would marry her first. Henry created Anne Marquess of Pembroke, elevating her from a commoner to noble. It was the first and only time a peerage was granted on a commoner queen in her own right, rather than to one of her male family members. When Henry had finally secured his annulment to Catherine of Aragon, he and Anne wed in a secret ceremony. Now Queen Anne bore a child, but to Henry's disappointment, it was another daughter, Elizabeth. Anne miscarried her second child, increasing strife in the marriage, partly due to Anne's refusal to ignore the king's philandering, caused Henry to resent her. Her enemies accused her of adultery and incest with her brother, crimes of which she was certainly innocent. But nonetheless, she was beheaded at the Tower of London. 11 days after Anne's execution, Henry married Jane Seymour, who, like Anne, was an English lady in waiting who had rebuffed the king's invitation to his bed. But it seemed Henry couldn't take no for an answer. Jane's father, Sir John Seymour, had been knighted by Henry VII and held several positions at court, but no peerage title. The family owned a manor house called Woff in Wiltshire. Jane was far less educated and sophisticated than Henry's previous wives, but her mother Margaret had given birth to 10 children, so the king was optimistic that she would provide him with a brood of healthy sons. But just in case, he put off her coronation until after their first child was born, and it was a boy, the long-awaited Prince Edward. Jane never got her coronation, however, as she died of childbed fever 12 days after the delivery. Having a queen in the family and an heir to the throne with their blood was an incredible windfall
Hi.
for the Seymours. They reaped the benefits of Jane's sacrifice long after her death. Her eldest brother Edward was created Duke of Somerset and was his nephew, King Edward VI, regent when he inherited the throne at the age of 9. Younger brother Thomas, Baron Sudley, tried to usurp his older brother's power and lost his head for his troubles. Catherine of Aragon died of cancer at 50, making Henry legally eligible to remarry in the eyes of the church. So his counselors advised him to once again use his marriage as a political playing card. A treaty was made for the hand of Anne of Cleves, sister of a German elector. But Henry didn't do well forcing his lust to follow politics. When he met Anne days before their scheduled wedding, he didn't find her attractive. He complained that she was ugly and unhygienic, and thus he was unable to consummate the marriage, though the aging king was most likely impotent by this time. Anne was happy to accept a divorce, a generous settlement and estates, and to escape with her head. 50-year-old Henry went back to chasing English ladies and soon married 16-year-old Catherine Howard, a cousin of Anne Boleyn. Her uncle, Thomas, Duke of Norfolk, was a scheming social climber. He saw what having a queen in the family had done for the Boleyns and the Seymours, so he groomed Catherine and put her in Henry's line of sight. While Henry was besotted, Catherine was being blackmailed by a former confidant who knew that she's not a virgin, having been molested by her music teacher years earlier. Worse, she was actively carrying out a love affair with the king's favorite courtier, which she may have been coerced into. When news of the queen's adultery reached the king, he was devastated and refused to see her. She was even more devastated when she was sentenced to death and beheaded in the Tower of London at just 19. Several members of the Howard family were imprisoned as accomplices, but the Duke of Norfolk, who had forced Catherine to marry the murderous monarch, got off scot-free.
Hi.
Henry's sixth and final wife Parr. The Parr family hailed from Northampton. They had many knights but no peerage titles. At 17, Catherine married Sir Edward Borough, who was her age but was sickly and died. Her second husband, John Neville, Baron Latimer, was twice her age. She raised his children and nursed him in his final years. Now a wealthy widow, Catherine moved to court to serve as lady-in-waiting to Princess Mary. She fell in love with Thomas Seymour, the brother of Queen Jane Seymour, and the pair planned to wed. But when the king set his sights on Catherine, she had little choice but to accept his proposal. She took advantage and had her brother created Marquis of Northampton, and her sister married to the Earl of Pembroke. She was a companion and nurse to
Hi.
the ailing old king.
Hi everyone. How are we? I hope we're well.
Feat
God
for
fucking
one of the
damn it.
time. Henry's failing health finally gave out at 55. After 3 marriages to ailing old men, Catherine finally wed the man of her dreams, Thomas Seymour. But he turned out to be a scoundrel and tried to seduce her stepdaughter, Princess Elizabeth. Catherine died at 36, giving birth to her only child. After Henry's son, Edward VI, died at 15, a faction of nobles managed to take over the country and declare his cousin, Jane Grey, queen. Her husband, Lord Guilford Dudley, was the son of one of the main conspirators, the Duke of Northumberland. Guilford declared himself consort and tried to control his powerful wife. But after just 9 days on the throne, Henry VIII's daughter, Mary, captured the couple and took up the throne. Jane
18.
and Guilford were both
We know this.
executed
I say this.
Monday,
I
and
am.
their 9-day reign remains disputed. Queen Mary I did her duty by wedding a foreign royal, King Philip II of Spain. Her sister, Elizabeth I, refused to marry at all, thus passing the English throne to her Scottish cousin, King James I and VI. All the members of the Stuart dynasty wed foreign royals. These alliances variously helped and hurt Britain in the numerous wars over land and religion, which dominated the 17th century. When the Stuart dynasty ended with childless Queen Anne, the throne passed to her
Yes.
relative, George the Elector of Hanover. The monarchs of the Hanoverian dynasty were very fond of riding home for spouses. 5 Hanoverian consorts hailed from one of the various German states, making for a thoroughly German British family. 2 of King George III's sons married commoners before they inherited the throne. The future King George IV wed Catholic Maria
Just
Herbert
18. Wow, that
and
doesn't make
William
me feel
wed Irish
insanely
actress
old at
Elizabeth
all.
Land. Their father was outraged and blackmailed both princes
Not
to
old
leave
at
their wives
all.
and marry foreign princesses instead. In 1772, George III passed a law requiring all members of the royal family to seek the monarch's permission before getting married. While it was never actually illegal for an English or British monarch to marry a commoner, from that point on, it may just as well have been.
Still made me
As
feel old.
subsequent
Just
monarchs would
18?
never allow their
Wow.
children to
Apparently I
marry
look
anyone
75.
less than royal. But all that changed when World War I.
You don't have to think when you type things out. So you thought of that and went, this is a good idea. This isn't hurtful at all.
And suddenly, the royal family's German heritage became a serious liability. King George V himself, married to Mary of Teck, a German and British royal, decided to rebrand the dynasty from Saxe, Colbert, and Gotha to the much more English Windsor,
No.
the name of his favorite castle. After Germany was defeated and a massive war debt sent their economy into a tailspin, the German people rose up against the royal families, who had ruled over them for centuries and abolished all the monarchies. Now there were no more German royals for the British royals to marry. Additionally, public perception of royalty was changing. The British no longer wanted to be reigned over by foreigners with ties to messy wars on the discovery of genetic science, the idea that royal blood gave one a divine right to rule had come crashing down. King George V allowed his children much more freedom in who they married, opening the door for the kingdom to get its first non-royal queen
Yes,
in nearly 400
I graduated high
years.
school at 16,
Elizabeth
but
Bones
apparently I'm
Bryan was the
23.
daughter of the Earl of Strathmore and King
Don't know how that
of
works.
Scotland. Her mother was an English commoner. She was born a lady, and
I
while
think if
not
you're
strictly
18 and
speaking
still
a
in high
commoner,
school, that's a wee
after
bit
so many
concerning.
generations of foreign princesses,
What the fuck are
having
you
the daughter
doing
of
with
a
your
Scottish
time?
earl as queen was refreshingly down to earth. Elizabeth grew up at Glamis Castle and was fond of dogs and horses. At 8, she attended school in London and impressed her teachers. But, as was customary for upper-class girls of the time, her education ended at 13. Glamis was a convalescent home for wounded soldiers.
Apparently I'm
and
23.
Elizabeth helped run it. After the war, she
Didn't
was
know when
a
I had
debutante in London high society.
all those
She
birthdays,
was
but
charming and cheerful
apparently I
and
am.
broke many hearts. One of her suitors was equerry to King George V's second son, Prince Albert.
I'm gonna
When
be
the
bitter.
prince met her, he fell
I'm gonna
head
be
over heels and
bitter.
asked her to marry him. Though she cared for him, she initially turned him down, not wanting the pressure of being royal. But eventually she agreed, and they wed in 1923.
I'm gonna be bitter. I'm
The
gonna stay
light-hearted
bitter because
Elizabeth
why the
was
fuck
the
do you
best
think I'm
British
old?
heir to the formal Windsor family. She was also a great support to shy Bertie, who suffered a stammer. Her charisma made up for his uneasiness during their many public engagements. The couple had 2 daughters, Elizabeth and Margaret. When George V died, Bertie's elder brother became King Edward VIII, but he abdicated within a year to marry his divorced mistress, leaving Bertie a throne he didn't want. Bertie was crowned King George VI with Elizabeth by his side.
Don't know when I
Throughout
became
World War II,
ancient.
the king and especially the queen visited troops, hospitals, and factories around Britain to boost public morale. Elizabeth became a symbol of British pride, and Adolf Hitler called her the most dangerous woman in Europe. The couple refused to leave London even when Buckingham Palace was bombed, though they did send their daughters to live at nearby Windsor Castle, where they would be safe. When the Allies won, the royal family was as popular as they had ever been, but the stress of the conflict impacted the king's health. He died at 56 of lung cancer. Elizabeth, now the queen mom, threw her support behind her 24-year-old daughter, the new Queen Elizabeth II. She was a loving grandparent and was especially close to Prince Charles. She also enjoyed traveling Europe with friends, collecting art and racehorses, and renovating the dilapidated Castle Bay in Scotland. She remained a popular fixture of the royal family, always dressed in fabulously colorful outfits, until her death in 2002 at the age of 101. Elizabeth II was among the last generation of European royals to wed another royal. Her husband, Philip, hailed from the Greek and Danish royal family. Their son is now King Charles III. His wife, Camilla, is the first English and commoner queen consort in 475 years. Camilla Shand was born in London to a middle-class family. Her father, Bruce, was an army officer, and her mother, Rosalind, was the daughter of the 3rd Baron Ashcombe. Her mother's grandmother was Alice Keppel, one of King Edward VII's mistresses. Though the family were well off and had noble connections, they were not royal themselves. She had a happy childhood, was an avid reader and equestrian. She attended finishing school in Switzerland, studied French in Paris, and then moved to London to work as a secretary in the swinging 60s. She had an on-off relationship with Andrew Parker Bowles for several years. They broke up in 1970. Andrew began dating Princess Anne and Camilla, Prince Charles. They were very well suited and matched each other's families. But in 1973, Charles was sent overseas with the Navy, and his relationship with Camilla Spencer girls, daughters of her late waiting. Camilla married Andrew Parker Bowles, and they had 2 children, Tom and Laura. Charles bowed to family pressure and married Diana Spencer. She was English, but was the daughter of the Earl of Spencer, so not a commoner. Charles has denied that he spent the night before his wedding with Camilla, but they picked up their affair shortly after he returned from his disastrous honeymoon. Camilla became notorious as the only woman in the royal marriage and was widely vilified in the press. She and Andrew divorced in 1904 and Charles and Diana in 1906. Prince Charles declared his relationship
I was
with
quite
Camilla
literally never a kid.
unconstitutional and hired an advisor to rehab their public images. Slowly, she began to be seen with him at public events. In 2005, Charles finally wed the woman he should have been with in the first place. For years, there was speculation about what Camilla's title would be when Charles came to the throne, considering how unpopular she was. But over the years, she's become more accepted as a member of the family. That question was answered on September 8, 2022, when Queen Elizabeth died and Charles became king. Camilla is now officially the Queen Consort of the UK. When Charles's eldest son, Prince William, was a baby, it was rumored that a few members of the royal family thought it would be swell if he were to someday wed Princess Madeline of Sweden, second daughter of King Carl XVI Gustav. She was born just 11 days before William, and as she would also grow up in a royal family, there would be no awkward adjustment period as she learned what was expected of a princess. But this revival of centuries-old royal marriage tradition never came to pass. Both William and Madeline have married commoners, as have all of the young royal members of Europe's 10 remaining royal families. William's wife, Catherine Middleton, hails from a wealthy
If you
family
call me baby,
with
I
some
will
royal
kill you.
connections, but no peerage title. Camilla and Catherine will likely
Why are we
usher
calling me
in
baby?
a
That's
new
really
era
gross.
of
That's really
commoner
creepy. That's
queens.
pedophilia-y creepy. Like, let's
Want
not do
even
that
more tea on
ever
history?
again.
Check out the History Tea Time podcast, available on Spotify,
That was
Apple
gross.
Podcasts, and Google
I don't like it when you
Podcasts.
motherfuckers call me
If
baby
you
and
enjoyed
love
this
and all that
video,
stuff. You can call me a
please
friend.
like,
I'm a
subscribe,
friend.
comment your
You're not
thoughts,
gonna
and
fuck
check
me.
out
You're
my
never
other
gonna get
royal
the
history
chance.
videos. If you really want to
Like,
help,
let's
please
be
consider
honest with
supporting our
ourselves.
Patreon. A link is in the description.
You will never
Thank you for
fucking meet
watching.
me. I'm gonna go get more water.
Anne Boleyn's sister and brother. Thank you to Love and Pies for sponsoring this video. Anne Boleyn is one of the most famous women in history. Her meteoric rise from minor noble to Queen of England, and her even faster downfall to a beheading in the Tower of London, is the stuff of legend, and the subject of too many novels and dramas to count. But two important characters in Anne's story often get sidelined. Her sister Mary was a mistress of King Henry VIII before she was, and bore him 2 children. And her younger brother George also had an impressive rise at court, only to fall with Anne when they were accused of incest together. He was beheaded 2 days before she was. I'm at Hever Castle, south of London, where the Boleyn siblings spent their youth. To better understand Queen Anne's childhood and get to know her fascinating and tragic sister and brother. The Boleyn family came from modest origins. Their name, alternately spelled Boleyn or Boleyn with a Y, may have derived from the French city of Bologna. Anne's great-grandfather, Geoffrey, rose to wealth as a haberdasher, then rose to power as Lord Mayor of London. He wed Lady Anne Hoe, the daughter of a baron, and raised his family near to the aristocracy, though they did not yet have a title. Geoffrey purchased 2 estates, Blickling in Norfolk and Hever Castle in Kent. At both locations, he built comfortable and modern manor houses for his family. Here at Hever, he repaired a 13th century stone bailey and
Goodbye.
built a modern dwelling within the walls. Geoffrey's son William
Why do we do such disturbing, disgusting, annoying shit?
Daughter of the Earl of Ormond, and was knighted at the coronation of King
We
Richard
can be
III.
friends in the fact that you are a subscriber. We are not going to be friends in the fact that I don't do friends.
Field with a red chevron. The design was likely chosen
I want to say
as
something.
a
Here I
pun
go.
on the
Not going to say it.
Boleyn name, and to represent bravery and valor. When Henry Tudor defeated Richard and seized the throne, the Boleyns switched allegiance.
To be known
Henry
to
VII
you
was
all,
keen
to
fill his court
call,
with
oh
men
my
who
fucking
possessed
God,
intelligence
in the
and
name of
merit,
Jesus.
rather than just noble blood. This was the perfect opportunity.
You're not going to
for
repent
Thomas
my
Webb,
ass, you
a
fucking
blind man who
cunt.
spoke multiple languages.
You're not going
He
to
became
repent
a
my
courtier
ass.
and diplomat.
You're not going to
He
repent
escorted
my
the king's
ass.
daughter,
You're not going to
Princess
repent
Margaret,
my
to
ass.
Scotland to wed King James
It's
IV,
not gonna
and
work.
he attended the wedding
Not
of Prince
gonna
Arthur
work.
and
Not
Catherine
going
of
to
Aragon.
work. It
Thomas
never
was
fucking
defeated
has,
and
you
married
weird
into a
fucker.
King Henry VIII. He and the young king got on especially well.
Let me try to
as
repent this
both were
bitch on
mad
the
for
internet. That
jousting.
seems like a good idea.
Around 1498, Thomas wed Elizabeth Howard, eldest daughter of the Earl of Surrey. She served as a lady-in-waiting to Queen Elizabeth of York and then to Queen Catherine of Aragon. Elizabeth was pregnant at least 6 times, but the details of her deliveries were not well recorded. It's still not clear exactly when Mary and Anne were born. Eldest daughter, Mary, was born around 1499. Elizabeth delivered 2 sons, Thomas and Henry, who both died around 1506. Anne was next, probably born in 1501, and George was the youngest surviving child, born in 1504. All of the children were delivered at Boleyn Hall, but in 1505, Thomas inherited Hever Castle from his father, and the family moved there as it was more convenient to the royal court in London. The 3 surviving Boleyn children, Mary, Anne, and George, were thick as thieves. They spent their childhoods together, here on the grounds and in the gardens of Hever Castle. As their parents were often away at court, they were looked after by a nurse, Mrs. Mary Orchard. The children took after their father in intelligence, charisma, and ambition, and they were eager to impress him. Thomas was a humanist and brought in tutors to educate his daughters as well as his son. The new queen, Catherine of Aragon, was herself highly educated, and intellectual women were just becoming fashionable in England. Knowing how to converse in French, play chess, read poetry, play music, sing and dance would help the daughters secure coveted places as maids of honor, contract noble marriages, and bolster their family's prestige. They also learned archery, falconry, riding, and hunting. George, like his father, trained as a knight and loved jousting. If
Thank you. I also like my eyes. They're on my body.
Intrigue, then I think you'll adore playing Love and Pies. The game is free to download on your phone or tablet. Help Amelia rebuild her family's cafe by playing a relaxing merged game to make baked goods for customers. And enjoy the telenovela meets sitcom storyline as she reconnects with her hunky high school sweetheart and solves the mystery of who burnt down the cafe. All in the charming town of Appleton, with its host of diverse characters. I really enjoy playing merged games when I need a break, and this is one of the best designed and enjoyable I've tried. The game stays fresh with new events, challenges, and storylines released regularly. Download Love and Pies now with my link below. And now, back to history. Anne was not the stereotypical middle child. She stood out from her siblings and was the first to leave home at the age of 11. Her father secured for her a place as a maid of honor to Archduchess Margaret of Austria. She was the daughter of Holy Roman Emperor Maximilian I, and she had been given the position as ruler of the Low Countries. It's not clear why Anne was favored over her older sister Mary. Perhaps their father felt Anne was better suited for the task. Once Anne arrived in Austria, her education was greatly expanded under Duchess Margaret's tutelage. Margaret was an incredibly intelligent, powerful, and progressive woman for her time. She had a special library just for the edification of her ladies. Margaret introduced young Anne to early Enlightenment philosophy, feminist ideas, and, most significantly, the Protestant Reformation. Margaret was impressed with her charming, bright, and mature new ward. She wrote to Anne's father thanking him for doing her the favor of sending a young lady so presentable and so pleasant, considering her youthful age. After 18 months with Margaret, Anne was given an even more prestigious position as a maid of honor to Henry VIII's sister Mary, who was about to wed Louis XII of France. There, 13-year-old Anne was reunited with her sister Mary, now 15, who had also been granted a place in the royal entourage. This tapestry depicts the wedding of Mary Tudor and Louis XII. The characters in the background are not specifically identified, but one might imagine that two of the young ladies
Hi, you might not know.
Boleyn, watching this lavish royal spectacle with awe. But the French royal marriage was far from happy. Mary Tudor was
What?
just 18 and was horrified and homesick at
No.
the
I've
wedding
done a
of
lot of
2-year-old
horrish,
Henry.
awful
Her brother
things,
Boleyn,
but I
by
think they
proxy, should choose her
helped me
second
mature into the
husband.
person I am today.
Despite two
And
previous
while a lot of those
marriages,
things were
Henry had
illegal
no
and not
sons
very
and
good
was
judgment,
desperate to get Mary pregnant.
I
The king
think
died
that's the
after
easiest
just
way
15 months
to
of matrimony.
mature as a
Rumors
person
whispered
and go
that
on
he
with
had
a life
expired from overexertion in the bedchamber.
compared to
But it
if
was more
you
like
get
that.
everything handed to you
Henry
your whole
VIII
life and then
forgot
you
his
never make a
promise and began
mistake.
negotiating for his sister to wed another old king. So she eloped with the man she truly loved, the Duke of Suffolk.
Because if you never
After
make
her
a mistake,
departure,
you're gonna
the
make a
Boleyn
really
sisters
big
remained
mistake
in
one day.
France to serve
Like
the next queen,
federal
15-year-old
prison
Claude.
mistake.
They likely both
So I
attended the
I
Fatal
don't
Cloth
regret
of
a lot of
Gold
the shit I've
public
done
summit between
purely
Henry
because
VIII
I
and
know
Francis I.
I learned
This
from
may
that,
have been where they
and
first
if it
met
causes
in
me
the
issues,
shade.
it causes me issues,
There,
but I
Mary
learned
was
from it.
considered the more beautiful of the sisters,
And
while
a lot
Anne
of
was the
those
more
times
astute.
I
It
was
rumored
really
that Mary
depressed and
conducted
honestly
affairs
kind of
with several
screaming
men,
for help.
including King Francis.
So
He
I
referred to
don't
her
regret
as
any of it. I really
English
don't.
Mare, my hackney,
And
and a very great
I
whore,
don't
the most infamous of all.
condone crime. I don't
Historians believe
condone bad
her
actions.
reputation was far worse than her actual
But I think
promiscuity. Nevertheless,
to
her father
torture
decided she
yourself
needed to get out of France. He took her
and
back
never
to
learn
England
from it, never
and
grow
secured
from
her
it,
place as a
it's
maid of
going to
honor
kill
the
you.
Count of Aragon. He also
So
secured
no, I
her
don't regret
marriage to
anything in life.
Harry,
I
a
don't.
wealthy and influential courtier. King Henry was a guest at the wedding and gave the couple a suspiciously large sum of money as a gift, possibly buying the compliance of the husband in the seduction of the wife. At some point, Mary became the king's mistress. When and how remains unclear. Anne remained at the sophisticated French court for a further 3 years.
Ugh.
There she gained knowledge of art, dance, fashion, music, poetry, and the flirtatious art of courtly love. Rumors later plagued Anne that she had learned a variety of French sexual tricks, which she used to ensnare the king. But in reality, she lived a sheltered life in Queen Claude's inner circle. She spent most of her time cloistered away caring for the queen during her 7 back-to-back pregnancies, and wouldn't have had much free time for love affairs. Anne did, however, become friends with King Francis's sister, Marguerite de Navarre, an outspoken humanist and evangelical reformer. The princess encouraged Anne in her growing Protestant convictions. In 1522, Anne rejoined Mary in England. She made her debut dancing in a pageant. Ladies dressed in white satin played the 7 virtues. Mary was kindness and Anne perseverance. They were guarded by a choir of boys representing vice. The king and 7 other lords in blue satin and cloth gold had a food fight with the boys in order to win the ladies' freedom. After the jolly revelry, the lords led the ladies to dance. There is no indication that Anne made an impression on Henry at this time. He was still in the midst of his affair with her sister, Mary. She gave birth to 2 children. Both were claimed by her husband, but are believed to have been sired by the king. The sisters were also reunited with their brother. As the only son, George Boleyn was expected to follow in his father's footsteps and work as a courtier, diplomat, and politician. He was introduced to King Henry during the Christmas festivities of 1514. 10-year-old George so impressed Henry that he was granted the coveted position of royal page. He may have spent some time in France with his sisters, which would explain his perfect French, but he spent most of his adolescence Oxford. Once the Boleyn siblings were reunited in their late teens, early 20s, they fell back into their childhood bond. They made a witty, attractive, and
I don't know.
court. Like his father, George was
I
a
know.
talented courtier and was counted among His Majesty's favorite companions. Privy purse expenses mention numerous large payouts to George for wagers won against the king at bowls, tennis, cards, and archery. He likely lost even more, as those who bested Henry too often didn't stay long in his company. George wrote poetry and did translations. He had a reputation as a rake. One of his enemies claimed that he forced widows and deflowered maidens, though this is generally interpreted to mean he was a Lothario, not an actual rapist. Some historians theorize that George had homosexual relationships as well, though there is no solid evidence of this. In 1523, the Boleyns were finally rewarded for their faithful service to the crown with a peerage of their own. Thomas was elevated to Viscount of Rochford and made a Knight of the Garter. 20-year-old George wed the king's second cousin, Jane Parker. She was a lady-in-waiting to Queen Catherine, the daughter
I
of Baron
guess.
and one of
Maybe.
the ladies
I don't
of
know.
court. The couple spent their honeymoon here at Hever, but the relationship seems to have been unhappy, and in their 12 years together, they had no children. George was appointed a gentleman of the Privy Chamber, and then royal cupbearer, both positions which put him close to the king and came with generous salaries. It is often assumed that the Boleyns achieved their prominence at court only because Anne slept her way to the top, but in fact they had achieved all this before she gained the king's attention. By 1526, Henry's affair with Mary had come to an end, and he turned his attention to her sister. Mary was a
What
more
is this?
classical beauty, but Anne had wit, charm, and sophistication in spades. Though many commented on her eyes, which were black, beautiful, and captivating, Anne became a star and was pursued by several eligible courtiers. But soon the king's aggressive flirtations made it clear that he intended to have her in
I
his
might be
bed.
making clothes. I
However,
don't
she
know.
had learned
Also,
her
if you,
sister's
yeah,
missteps
fucking,
and
I
had
don't
no
fuck with the Bible. So if
intention
you
of
send
becoming a
Bible
royal
verses
mistress,
or
bearing
shit
an
about
illegitimate
Jesus
child or
Christ,
two, and
you're
then being
getting
tossed
kicked.
aside. Anne recruited her mother in her quest to avoid the king. Whenever His Majesty tried to get her alone,
My eyes are killing you?
Elizabeth was
Haha,
always
very
there
funny.
playing chaperone. Anne fled the court and the king's advances.
I hope they
and
kill
returned
you.
here to her childhood home at Hever. It was here that she received suggestive letters from Henry. Henry went so far as to pursue Anne to Hever. Thomas Boleyn was an ambitious man, though many dramas have portrayed him as a devious character who pushed Mary and Anne into the king's bed. In reality, he loved his children dearly and didn't want to see either of his daughters disgraced as a royal mistress. But Thomas and Elizabeth couldn't refuse the honor of a royal visit. They put Henry up in their own bedchamber. His Majesty was paranoid about his own safety and had this lock installed on his chamber door. The king spared little thought for the great expense. Feeding and entertaining his royal entourage cost the Boleyn family.
I
Anne
don't
wanted to
fuck
marry
with
a
the
more
Bible.
station, but saying no to the king was not
Oh,
an
I'm
easy
sorry, I
thing.
have big eyes. Do you want me to
Henry
fucking
if he would marry her
fucking
first.
lobotomize you?
Once Anne was the
My
king's
fucking
fiancée,
stutter came out.
Boleyn
Ain't that fun? Ain't
fortunes
that fucking
really
fun?
took off. Her father Thomas
I
was
don't fuck
elevated
with the
even higher
Bible.
to
You
Earl
say
of
shit about
Wiltshire
the
and Earl of
Bible,
Ormond.
you get
He passed
fucking
his
banned.
previous
You
title
get
of Viscount
fucking kicked.
Rochford
I
to
don't
his
fuck
son
with it.
George, who
And
was
yet there's
knighted
all
and
these
appointed
religious
governor of
extremists
Bedlam
that
Hospital,
keep
a profitable
sending me
position.
Bible
He was
verses like I'm
also
going to
granted the
rot in
palace
hell
of
currently.
Boleyn, which
I'll
he
deal with that in
adjoining
100 years.
lavishly
Thank you very
decorated
much.
with
You're not
a
dealing with
chapel,
it now.
tennis court, and a bathroom with hot and cold running water. At just 25, George was sent on his first diplomatic mission to France. Despite his youth, he was a charismatic ambassador and made a favorable impression on Francis I. His first mission was to encourage the French to support Henry's divorce from his wife, Catherine of Aragon. Henry thought that he could secure an annulment in a matter of months, but he soon found that the Pope was against him, and the ordeal took another 7 years. Anne's casting fiance's impatience. Henry granted her the title of Marquis of Pembroke. She was one of only 2 peeresses in her own right in the Tudor era, and she outranked her own father. Much of her father and mother's careers from this point on were dedicated to securing the king's divorce, and thus Anne's royal marriage. Henry's argument for annulling his marriage to Catherine was that she had been married to his older brother, Arthur, who died at the age of 15. The same logic would have made it sinful for Henry to marry Anne, the sister of his former mistress and mother
Please
of
shut the
his
fuck
children.
up.
The king was eager to sweep his old girlfriend under the rug, so Mary was sent away from court. In 1528, her husband William died of a sweating sickness, leaving her in considerable debt. Anne secured for her sister a widow's pension and provided for her nephew's education, but she kept Mary at arm's length.
No, I don't.
With Mary on the outs, Anne and George grew closer. They both had strong Protestant leanings. He presented her with 2 religious texts, which he had translated from French into English and dedicated to the Right Honourable Lady Marchioness of Pembroke. Her most loving and friendly brother sent greetings. George encouraged Anne to show the king a religious pamphlet, and while Anne had a great influence on Henry's ultimate decision to break with the Catholic Church, George also had some sway in His Majesty's mind. The
Hi.
Viscount was a talented debater.
Ugh.
It was he whom Henry chose to argue his case for royal supremacy over the Church. George was also called to Parliament, where he voted in favor of religious reform. Once Henry had founded his own Church of England, he granted himself annulment. Henry and Anne traveled to France to secure Francis I's approval of their marriage. Mary Boleyn was one of Anne's attending ladies on the trip. On the voyage home, with their union secured, though not yet sanctified, Henry and Anne finally consummated their relationship. One has to wonder what Mary was thinking, stuck on a ship with her ex-lover, who was now besotted with her sister. Mary and George attended Anne's coronation in 1533. She was visibly pregnant when the crown of St. Edward was placed upon her head. The baby turned out to be a daughter, Elizabeth. The birth of another girl was a disappointment to the king. Mary eloped with William Stafford, a nearly penniless soldier, and set him some night. When she became pregnant and was forced to reveal a marriage, her family was furious. As queen, Anne could have secured her a much more prestigious match, and the ambitious Boleyns couldn't comprehend Mary throwing away such an opportunity. The family disowned Mary. She wrote to her father, mother, and brother, but they ignored her. She wrote to Anne that she might have chosen a greater man of birth, but never one who should have loved her so well. She went on, I had rather bake my bread with him than be the greatest queen in Christendom, and I believe verily he would not forsake me to be king. Anne relented and sent her sister a gold cup and some money, but the sisters never met again. In 1536, Anne miscarried a son. Henry was growing frustrated with her failure to provide him with a male heir, and, as was his M.O., the king's eye had wandered to one of her maids of honor, Jane Seymour. Anne's enemy, Thomas Cromwell, began to build a case against her. It was illegal to torture members of the aristocracy, so he targeted a court musician, Mark Smeaton. In agony, he confessed to having slept with the queen, and he named 4 other noble courtiers as Anne's lovers: Sir Henry Norris, Sir Francis Weston, Sir William Brereton, and Anne's own brother, George Boleyn. The accusation of incest was particularly damning, and helped to secure the case against the queen. Cromwell presented his flimsy evidence to the king, who was all too eager to believe it. Unaware that his fate was sealed, George was expected to be named a Knight of the Garter, but the king gave the honor instead to one of George's rivals. A week later, Anne watched as George fought gallantly in a May Day jousting tournament. The next day, the siblings were arrested. All 4 accused noblemen denied the charges and proclaimed Anne's innocence. There was virtually no evidence against them. George's wife Jane has long been vilified for jealousy towards Anne, but that was not the case. Her only
I
mention
don't
in the
understand
trial
anything
records
you
was
people
that
are
she
saying, and I wish I
confessed
did
and told
because
her
it
Henry
makes me
was
feel
not
outsited.
able to satisfy a woman, and he had neither capacity nor virility. This evidence was incriminating as it gave Anne motive for adultery. Nevertheless, the majority of courtiers believed in George's innocence. He argued his own case in court so persuasively that wagers were made 10-1 in favor of his acquittal. But the king wanted to be rid of his wife, so justice was thrown out the window. George's own uncle, Thomas Howard, Duke of Norfolk, sat on the jury and condemned him to death. With George's conviction, Anne's guilt was a foregone conclusion. She was sentenced and locked in the Tower of London. She could see from a window as her brother and the 4 other men accused with her were led to Tower Hill. They had been condemned to be hanged, drawn, and quartered. The gracious king commuted it to mere beheading. Loquacious as ever, George gave a long, fine speech, which so enraptured the mob that there was ne'er a boo or jeer. It was not considered honorable to deny guilt on the scaffold, but George did blame bad
This is
luck
fun.
on
We all speak our own
circumstances,
languages,
instead
and
of
I have
innocence.
no clue what
Finally,
anyone's
he
saying,
signed
and I feel
George's
outsited
convictions
in my
and
own
calmly
shit.
laid his head on the block.
Doesn't make me
The
feel
men's
bad at
heads
all.
were not spiked on London Bridge, as was tradition for traitors. Rather, they were buried with their bodies. George was laid to rest in the Royal Chapel of St. Peter ad Vicula. 2 days later, Anne was laid next to him. Thomas and Elizabeth were devastated by the deaths of their children. It is not known if they ever saw Mary or any of their grandchildren again. The Boleyns lost their court positions and the earldom of Ormond. They returned to Hever Castle in disgrace. Elizabeth died just 2 years after her children's deaths, at the age of 57. Thomas followed her to the grave a year later. The Boleyn family home was inherited by the author of its destruction, King Henry. He granted it to his 4th wife, Anne of Cleves, as part of her annulment settlement. She brought new life to the castle after escaping her murderous husband. Over the centuries, Hever Castle changed hands numerous times and fell into disrepair. In 1903, it was purchased by American millionaire William Waldorf Astor, who restored the historic residence to the glorious condition we see it in today. Though she was the least ambitious Boleyn sibling, Mary was the only one to survive the spring of 1536. Little is known of her life after her sibling's death. She and William
I feel
had
like
2
we're
more
making
children,
fun of me, and that's why
Edward
we
and
don't
Anne,
want to talk
who was
English, so
named
I
in
don't
her late
know.
father's honor. Mary died of an unknown cause in her mid-40s. Her 2 elder children, Catherine and Henry, were favored when their cousin and possible half-sister, Elizabeth I, came to the throne. Elizabeth and Catherine formed a close bond. She was named Chief Lady of the Bedchamber, the highest-ranking female position at court. She oversaw her cousin's elaborate hair, makeup, and dressing, all while carrying 14 children. Henry married Anne Morgan, and they had 16 children. He served as a member of Parliament, was created Baron of Hunsdon, a Knight of the Garter, Master of the Queen's Hawks, and was the Queen's personal bodyguard. His ultimate achievement was to become Lord Chamberlain, in which role he was a patron of Shakespeare's theatre company, known as the Lord Chamberlain's Men. Queen Elizabeth Rose Lyon was a direct descendant of Catherine Carey. Thus, Queen Elizabeth II and King Charles III are descendants of Mary Boleyn.
Oh, fine, we're not
Mary was
speaking
brought into
English
public
again.
consciousness by the 2001 Philippa Gregory novel, The Other Boleyn Girl, and the 2008 film adaptation, in which she was played by Scarlett Johansson, and Anne was portrayed by Natalie Portman. While the novel and film admirably brought this long-forgotten woman to light, both were heavy on romance, distorted many historic events and characters, and made Mary seem all the more lovable by pitting the sisters against each other and painting Anne as manipulative and heartless, which was far from the truth. Want even more tea on history? Check out the History Tea Time podcast. A special thank you goes to my patron, Brittany Ross. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, comment your thoughts, and check out my other royal history videos. If you really want to help, please consider supporting me on Patreon. A link is in the description. Thank you for watching.
I was visiting my parents last week and I found my old LPS collection. So in honor of the
Thank you.
Of the world.
I'm gonna go pee.
Jane Grey, the 9 Days Queen of England. Thank you to Magellan TV for sponsoring this video. Henry VIII's only son, Edward VI, died tragically young. On his deathbed, he signed a new will, surpassing his rightful heir, his Catholic sister Mary, and making his cousin, 16-year-old Protestant, Lady Jane Grey, the new queen. The reluctant teenager sat on the throne for only 9 days before the people rallied behind Princess Mary. Once she claimed her birthright, Queen Bloody Mary had her cousin beheaded in the Tower of London. Jane Grey may have been born at Bradgate Park in October 1537, or in London between May 1536 and February 1537. The births of sons were recorded in great detail, while daughters were considered far less important. But Jane was born into a royal family which had plenty of female children, but was notoriously short on male heirs. She was the eldest daughter of the eldest daughter of King Henry VIII's younger sister, Mary. Her grandmother, a famous beauty, had been briefly wed to King Louis XII of France. After his death, she eloped with an Englishman, Charles Brandon. The king was furious, as he had wanted to marry her off to another old man, but he loved his sister, so decided not to have Charles beheaded. Instead, he levied a hefty fine, which impoverished the newlyweds. They were poor but happy, and most importantly for our story, English. The Brandons had 4 children, 2 sons and 2 daughters. Their firstborn son died in infancy, but their second, Henry Brandon, had a slim but real possibility of becoming king. He was born when his uncle Henry VIII had only one living legitimate child, Princess Mary, and Queen Catherine of Aragon, at 38, was unlikely to bear any more children. Henry could not comprehend handing his throne to a daughter, and as he had no sons, next in the line of succession were the descendants of his only living siblings, his 2 sisters. His elder sister Margaret had married King James IV of Scotland, but Henry was at war with the Scots, so he wrote Margaret's offspring out of his will. But as the Brandon children were English, the king favored them. During his lifetime, Henry Brandon was the only person in the line of succession who was both male and English. But alas, he died at the age of 10. This left only his 2 sisters, Frances and Eleanor. They grew up close to their cousin, Princess Mary, and visited the royal court often, though they were the poor relations. Frances in particular reveled in education and became deeply ambitious to improve her station. Henry VIII divorced his first wife and declared his daughter, Princess Mary, illegitimate. He then married Anne Boleyn, but when she produced only a daughter, Elizabeth, the king had Anne beheaded, and Elizabeth declared illegitimate as well. At this point, there was a real chance that if the king didn't manage to have a son, the crown could end up on Frances's head. At 16, she married equally ambitious Henry Grey. Their first child was a son, but he died shortly after birth. She then had 3 healthy daughters, Jane, Catherine, and Mary. Within a year of Jane's birth, Henry VIII's 3rd wife, Jane Seymour, finally gave birth to the long-awaited male heir, Edward. The baby prince was healthy and was expected to inherit the throne, thus dashing any chances Frances had at becoming queen. Nonetheless, Frances had great ambitions for her daughters, especially the eldest, Jane. Most Tudor parents were extremely strict, but Frances was on another level. She expected perfection and was demanding and domineering. Jane's meekness, quiet nature, and unassuming manner irritated her mother, who sought to harden her with beatings and punishment. Jane did receive an outstanding humanist education. Her parents hired the future Bishop of London to educate her in Latin, Greek, Hebrew, and Italian. This investment would typically have been spent on a son if the family had any, and Jane was far more lettered than most noble girls of her time. She took to academics with joy and much preferred spending the day in the library reading Plato than going outside to ride or hunt. The Grey family had taken to Protestantism with fervor, and young Jane corresponded with some of the great religious reformers of the time. Frances became friends with the king's sixth and final wife, Catherine Parr, also a devout Protestant and a highly educated woman. She secured 13-year-old Jane a position at court as a maid of honor to the queen. Jane admired Catherine and grew very close to her, seeing her as a second, kinder mother. When Henry VIII died in 1547, his will left the throne to his 9-year-old son, Edward VI. Next in the succession, he reinstated his two daughters, Princess Mary and Princess Elizabeth, though they were still legally illegitimate. Henry officially struck the Scottish line of his sister Margaret out completely, but provided that if his children didn't have offspring, then the crown would pass to the descendants of his younger sister, Mary. Catherine Parr married Thomas Seymour, and Jane Grey moved with her to Sudley Castle. There she spent time with her cousin, Princess Elizabeth, who was also under the care of the Dowager Queen. Jane stayed by Catherine's side through her pregnancy, childbirth, and death from childbed fever. Jane was the chief mourner at her surrogate mother's funeral. Afterward,
I'm back.
Thomas Seymour kept Jane at his home, as he thought he might be able to use the teenager to his advantage. He was the brother of Victoria Jane Seymour, and was therefore the maternal uncle of the young King Edward VI. His older brother, Edward Seymour, had been named regent, and the two uncles were in a tug of war over the affections of the child monarch. Thomas plotted a marriage between Edward and Jane. He wanted to make the girl over whom he had so much influence queen. Thomas attempted to kidnap King Edward, but he was seized in the royal apartments, arrested, and beheaded. Edward Seymour's position as regent was not to last.
Thank
John
you.
Dudley, the Duke of Northumberland, claimed the regency in a coup and had Seymour beheaded. Northumberland was one of the dukes who had enriched himself by taking land from the church and the people during Henry VIII's dissolution of the monasteries. When a group of peasants rose up in protest, Northumberland defeated and brutally executed the ringleaders. The people had not forgotten Kit's rebellion, and Northumberland was deeply hated. By this time, King Edward was beginning to assert his own authority. He was staunchly Protestant and overhauled the way common people worshipped. He outlawed
I'm not gonna laugh.
rosaries, and the Latin Mass, and he imprisoned anyone who continued Catholic practices. The most defiant of all was his own heir, his elder sister, Princess Mary. Edward was furious with her and was determined that she should never have the throne, and she never would have if Edward married and had a son of his own. But in February 1553, the 15-year-old king fell suddenly ill with consumption, what we now call tuberculosis. The finest doctors in the land believed there was
Don't
no
yell at
way
me that you want
escape
me to
from his
cry.
fate. Princess Mary was closer to the throne
That's
than ever
mean.
before. For Edward, a return to Catholicism spelled the spiritual ruin of the nation, and for his counselors, who had long ago seized church land, it spelled financial ruin. So Northumberland encouraged the ailing king to sign a new device for the succession. The act passed over Princess Mary on the grounds that she had been declared illegitimate.
I don't know
For the
what
same
people are
reason,
saying.
Princess Elizabeth, though Protestant, would also have to be passed over. So that meant the throne must go to his cousin Frances and her three daughters, Jane, Catherine, and Mary. But Edward, like his father, couldn't possibly comprehend a woman inheriting the throne. So instead, he bequeathed the crown to Frances's heirs male, who didn't yet exist. The Grey daughters were hastily married off in the hopes
It's
that one
fucking
of them would
crochet,
bear a
you
son
bitch.
before his death. 12-year-old Catherine was wed to the son of the Earl of Pembroke. Mary, only 8, was betrothed to the middle-aged and disfigured Baron of Wilton. The greatest prize,
Yeah,
16-year-old
putting time
Jane,
out for a
was
fucking
married
reason,
to Northumberland's own son.
Oh yeah.
18-year-old
Well, we're gonna all keep
Dudley.
purposely
When first informed
not
of
letting her
betrothal,
know what we're
Jane
saying.
refused,
And
but
so
her
when she's really
father
sad, we're
struck
gonna
her
get mad at her and we're
several
gonna tell her to
times,
smile
making
and
it
she's
clear that
gonna
she
still
had
be
no
sad
choice in
because
the
she's
matter.
fucking
In May, Jane and
confused.
Dudley were wed in a
She's
ceremony fit for a
confused.
king.
Okay.
King Edward was too ill to attend, but he issued a royal warrant providing fine clothes
But
for
no,
the wedding
we're all
party,
gonna see it. Like,
jousts,
smile.
masks, and the attendance of foreign ambassadors.
No, we're the reason she's
The
sad
king's
because
health
we made her fucking
continued to fail fast,
confused.
and it became clear that there would not be time for Jane to become pregnant and deliver a bouncing baby boy.
Damn it.
Edward would have no choice but to settle for a woman inheriting his throne. On his deathbed, he changed the device of the succession. At Northumberland's request, he passed over Frances and changed the wording of who would get the crown from the Lady Jane's heirs male to the Lady Jane and her heirs male. And with that stroke of the pen, he changed his cousin's fate. Edward died on the 6th of July, 1553, age 15. Northumberland managed to keep the new succession plan and the king's death secret.
No, I'm upset because fucking they know I can't understand it because I don't know what the fuck it is. I can't fucking read it because I don't know the fucking language, and that's the whole reason they keep talking in it.
Northumberland sent ships to
And so I'm sitting here and I'm like confused as fuck. Because I'm like, are they making fun of me? What's happening? And it's making me fucking sad.
The Tower of London, the fortress which was at the center of power in England. Whoever held the tower held the throne. The
What
endless
keeps happening?
and wars thrown at you in history classes are not what made me fall in love with the past. It was learning about how historic figures actually lived their lives and related to one another. If you want to know more about what it was like to be a 16th century royal, then I highly recommend The Private Lives of the Tudors. This 3-part documentary gives an intimate look at the lives, loves, and scandals of England's most celebrated royal dynasty. You can watch this and so many more educational and entertaining documentaries on Magellan TV. This platform is dedicated to delivering the finest curated documentaries from around the world. They have an incredible collection highlighting whatever you're interested in, including scientific discoveries, nature, art, culture, crime, and beyond. And you know I can't get enough of their library of history documentaries. 2 other series I have thoroughly enjoyed are She-Wolves, the Early Queens of England, and Secrets of the Castle. Click
Shut
link
the
in
fuck
description to get a
up!
free 30-day trial
Shut
to
the
watch
fuck
The Private
up!
Lives of the Tudors and
I'm
all the
fucking
rest.
confused.
Please
You don't know what
see the
anyone's
collection
saying,
of
so
over
yeah, I'm fucking
3,000
upset, and I'm
documentaries.
getting upset!
And now,
I-
back to
And you're sitting here being like, don't be emotional, be strong.
Jane
Fuck
Grey
off.
to Northumberland's mansion and informed that she was now queen. She burst into tears and refused the position.
Fucking confused because I'm like, I don't understand this language. They could be making fun of me to my fucking face.
Arrived to put pressure on her. She reluctantly accepted.
So yeah, I'm gonna be fucking. I'm gonna be fucking scared. Don't be emotional. Be strong. You can be emotional and strong, bitch.
Where English monarchs customarily resided from the time of their
I'm
ascension
fucking
until their coronation.
confused.
Edward's death was announced to the public, and Jane was declared Queen of England.
It's fucking annoying because you keep doing this.
To murmurings.
I know you know can speak English. I
I
just fucking said.
Matilda, whose reign from 1141 to 1148 caused civil war and remains disputed. Jane's royal procession into the tower was full of pomp and ceremony, but two details highlighted how wrong this event appeared to those who witnessed it. Her mother, Frances, whose claim to the throne should have come first, carried her daughter's train, and her new husband, Guilford, placed himself at the head of the procession, even before his wife. It was clear that Northumberland intended to make his son the new king. Many saw plainly his attempts to control the country through his daughter-in-law.
I'm fucking confused.
Might have poisoned King Edward.
I don't know other language other than like
That she had no choice.
English and like a smidgiest bit of Spanish, and I can't read Spanish.
The Lord Treasurer brought
So
her
yeah, I'm
the
fucking
crown to
confused when
try
you're
on.
speaking a language I don't fucking know, and I'm a little scared that you're making fun of me. And I know you can speak English. You speak English when you come in here, and then you speak another language I don't know and I don't get, and I get confused really quickly.
Her refusal undermined Northumberland's plans. Dudley petulantly threatened to leave her and refused to
It's like I can follow it for a sec, and then just right off the deep end. I get really confused because I don't fucking know what's happening.
The council received a message from Princess Mary asserting her right to the throne and demanding that she be proclaimed queen. She offered them amnesty if they bent the knee, ruin and death if they did not. The council replied that Jane was queen by Edward's authority, and that Mary was illegitimate and supported only by a few lewd, base people. Jane had the most powerful and wealthy
Don't call me
men in the
honey,
country,
bitch.
and the might of the Tower of London and its massive arsenal behind her, while Mary had the support of a handful of low-level country gentlemen. Any gambler would have favored Jane heavily for an easy victory.
No, I don't get it.
Mary were now confident in their own right to the title. They each sent out dozens of letters to rally support, and both signed them Queen. The Privy Council had gravely mistaken.
Nobody slapped me. I don't fucking get what people are saying. That's why I'm fucking confused, you cunt. Oh, her mom slapped her. No, if my mom slapped me, I'd be beating her fucking ass right now, you dumbass. Her mom slapped her. Okay, that has never worked a day in her life. I'm fucking confused because I don't get what people are saying. It feels like people are making fun of me.
And marched out of London with 3,000 soldiers. Meanwhile, Mary had gathered an army of nearly.
And I don't get it. I don't get the language. So yeah, I'm fucking confused and a little concerned that people are like fucking making fun of me.
More and more nobles switched their allegiance, and as she marched closer to London, she was greeted by crowds cheering.
No, I don't.
Jane and the Privy Council were bombarded with news of Mary's increasingly competitive stance, and without Northumberland's strong personality holding them together, lords began skulking away in the night. The treasurer of the mint went missing, and reports came in that he had recruited 10,000 men, not for Jane, but for Mary. Jane knew she was in serious trouble. In desperation, she ordered the gates of the tower locked and guarded to keep her counselors in. She sent increasingly desperate letters to lords around the country, begging them to come to her defense. Meanwhile, Guilford continued to put on airs and dress as a king. He presided over council meetings and dined in state, alone. Finally, Northumberland was in position to engage Mary's forces. He had fewer men, but much stronger artillery. That was until his ships anchored off the coast, mutinied, and lent their considerable firepower to Mary. When news reached him of just how much the odds were stacked against him, he abandoned the cause and rode away. Back in the tower, Jane's own uncle, the Earl of Arundel, had abandoned her as well.
Okay, so yeah,
He
making
called
fun
an
of me.
emergency meeting
That's
of all
making
the
fun
three
of me.
counselors who had left Jane. Together they signed a letter
So I'm worrying about the correct fucking thing.
and making Northumberland a scapegoat for everything that had happened. Arundel rode post haste to Mary to tell her of the council's change of heart. He begged her forgiveness in the hopes of saving his own neck. The rest of the counselors went to Cheapside and announced that Mary was now queen. The people rejoiced, bonfires were lit, wine was guzzled, and songs were sung throughout London. On July 19th, only Jane's husband and father remained with her in the tower. Lord Grey entered the throne room where his daughter was sitting. He removed the cloth of state from over her head, in clear indication that she was no longer queen. There was no anger, no tears. Jane had never wanted the throne, and she said she would give it up as gladly as she had accepted it. She asked, rather naively, "Can I go home now?" But rather than her nightmare coming to an end, it had only just begun. Jane, Dudley, and Henry Grey were escorted from the royal apartments to another, much less glamorous part of the tower, the jailhouse. Northumberland, who had so nearly taken control
It's
of
not
England,
fucking
was
knitting.
arrested by Arundel. On his cart ride back to London, he was pelted with stones.
I didn't have a problem with my mom. Why are we assuming I have a problem with my mom? That's why I'm confused. Now I'm fucking confused. These people are talking shit in a language I don't get.
To take control of the tower. Cheering crowds lined the streets. She recognized that Jane had been a political pawn, and she did not wish to execute her cousin. Jane's mother, Frances, fled with her childhood friend, Mary, that her husband and daughter had been led astray by Northumberland. Henry Grey was pardoned and set free. Northumberland, in desperation,
Her mom probably said they're supposed to
Catholicism,
I'll
but
fucking
that
beat you.
didn't buy
Shut the
him
fuck up.
Queen's mercy. He was beheaded on August
Also,
22nd.
if my mother slapped me across the face, let's use our critical thinking skills. There would be a mark on my face.
Locked up in separate parts of the tower, while Mary's advisors pressured her to dispose of her former usurper.
Fucking
On November
idiotic.
13th,
Oh,
Jane
Avery
was
got
led out
confused.
of
Oh,
the
she
tower
got confused
and walked
because
for
we're speaking a
miles
language
through
she
the
does
streets of
not
London
get, and
to
she
the
got
Guild
fucking
Hall,
worried
where she
because
was
no
put on
fucking shit.
trial. The court began with a Catholic liturgy. Jane,
Fuck
dressed
off.
in
No.
black, held a Protestant prayer book. She sat calmly as the charges against her were read. Multiple documents she had signed, Jane the Queen, were used as proof of her treason. She pled guilty and was sentenced to burning at the stake or beheading at the Queen's pleasure. Mary continued to
Oh my god, she got confused like a normal person because we're speaking a language she doesn't get.
Might have even pardoned her and allowed her back in court. But the cousins still had one big conflict. Jane would not convert to Catholicism at any cost. Mary's first priority as queen was to undo all the Protestant
It's been
reforms
coffee time. I've been drinking coffee the whole time.
Laws were reversed, and Mass and the Latin prayer book were reintroduced. Mary, already 37, was desperate to wed and give birth to a Catholic heir who would keep the country on the path of righteousness. fell in love with a portrait of her cousin, King Philip II of Spain. Philip was preparing to come to his bride, but he was scared off by a new uprising in Jane's favor. Protestant Sir Thomas Wyatt raised 4,000 men in an attempt to remove Mary from the throne. The rebels were defeated easily by the crown's forces, arrested and hanged. Henry Grey was discovered to be one of the rebels, thus sealing his daughter's fate. As long as Jane lived, she would be a rallying point for Protestant rebels. So Queen Mary signed her cousin's death warrant. During their 7 months of incarceration, Guilford carved his wife's name into the stone wall of his cell. When he was informed that he was to die in 5 days, he requested to see Jane one last time, but she refused, answering that it would only increase their misery and pain, and that they would shortly meet again in the afterlife. On February 12, 1554, Jane watched from a window as her husband was led to the scaffold, where many gentlemen waited to shake the hand of the erstwhile king consort. When the axe struck him, she exclaimed, "O Guilford, Guilford." Next, Jane was brought to the scaffold. She was composed and brave, even at the sight of the axe and her husband's decapitated corpse. She gave a short speech confessing her guilt in accepting a throne that was not rightfully hers. According to legend, she asked the executioner, "Will you take it off before I lay me down?" referring to her head.
Not
To which he
knitting.
answered, "No, madam." Once
It's not what it's
blindfolded,
called.
Jane was unable to find the block of her hands, and in a moment of panic, she cried out,
Well, it's not
"What shall
knitting,
I
you
do?
fucking idiot.
Where is it?" A witness came forward and helped her to find her way. With her head laid down on the block, Jane spoke the last words of Jesus Christ.
I build the
"Lord,
entire
into thy
time.
hands I commit
Actually, I have a
my
Minecraft
spirit."
video coming out next
And a
time.
16-year-old, 9 days queen, lost her head. Jane and Guilford were buried together, along with other victims of the Tower of London, in the chapel of St. Peter at Vicula. Her father, Henry Grey, was beheaded 11 days later. Her mother, Frances, was granted a pardon and lived at court with her surviving daughters, Catherine and Mary. Though Jane remains disputed as a Queen of England, her innocence and bravery in the face of such overwhelming forces and her tragic demise made her a Protestant martyr and have elevated her brief life to the stuff of legends. Queen Mary I went on to a brutal, bloody, tragic, and short reign of her own, which will be the subject of next week's video. Don't want to wait to see the next episode? Patrons get exclusive early access to almost all of my multi-part series on Patreon early. If you would like to become a patron and help me make more fascinating history videos, check out the link in the description. Thank you for watching. Royal Castles and Palaces of England. Part 1. Medieval.
Crochet. I'm fucking crocheting. Are you deaf? Or do you not hear? Do you not hear, bitch? I've said it 4 fucking times. 4. How old am I? 18. If you say 23, I'm going to ban you. You are going to get banned. You are going to get kicked out. You are not welcomed here. I am not old.
To the grand banqueting halls of Henry VIII, the luxurious staterooms of the Stuarts and Georgians, to the lovingly and expensively maintained residences of the modern royal family. Royal castles and palaces have played witness to the
Also,
lives and
literally just a panel. Just a panel of material. It's literally just a panel of material that I'll probably sew into something later on. I don't know.
In this 3-part series, we'll explore 15 of the most historically important royal castles and palaces of England. begin with the medieval castles built to be tough and to impose the king's might upon his subjects. Comfort and luxury were an afterthought to staying alive during siege warfare. These oldest royal residences have nearly a millennia of history under their belts. They have been transformed many times over the years and have served a number of colorful purposes, from seat of democratic government to scene of tyrannical torture and execution, from fabricated namesake of
Oh my god, it's almost like that will literally not even matter because I already had 1,000 plus during this live, you fucking moron.
royal residence from the 1020s to 1530. King Canute the Great built the first royal residence on strategic Thorney Island in the Thames.
Also, why the fuck are you blue?
In the 1020s. A few decades later, Edward the Confessor built
It's almost like it like doesn't like matter because like I already got the majority earlier in the day. And everyone is in school and at work at the moment. So yeah, it's a little low considering I don't condone people compromising their education for me, and they know this, and I'm not even at 2K. Oh my god. Oh, no shit, it's fucking low, you moronic fuck.
After William the Conqueror took over in the Norman invasion.
We'll only do another live later. Anyway, it doesn't even matter.
Westminster was the center of power. In 1295, during the reign of Edward I, the first official parliament with representatives from around the country met here. The palace witnessed the birth of Edward I, Edward V, and the death of Edward IV. In 1512, early in the reign of Henry VIII, a fire destroyed the royal privy chambers. Henry moved his court to the Palace of Whitehall and used that as his new royal residence. But
Oh my god, I don't give a shit.
Westminster, as it does to this day, as the palace had been built as a residence rather than a government building. There were no chambers large enough for the two legislative bodies to meet. State ceremonies took place in the Painted Chamber, originally Henry III's bedchamber. This room was nearly demolished by the failed gunpowder plot of 1605, when Guy Fawkes and co-conspirators attempted to blow up the king and parliament. Remember the 5th of November. The House of Commons, elected by the people, did not have a chamber of its own, so often held debates next door in Westminster Abbey. In the 1550s, the Commons took up residence in the St. Stephen's Chapel, the former chapel of the royal family. The House of Lords continued to balloon as successive monarchs appointed more like-minded lords to get around the limitations of the Constitution. By 1801, the Lords had outgrown the Painted Chamber and moved into the larger White Chamber. Parliament struggled to conduct business in the limited space of the medieval building. New structures of varying style and quality were added to the patchwork palace. Architectural critics panned the mashup of medieval Gothic and neoclassical architecture. In 1834, a stove used to destroy the exchequer's tally sticks overheated and burned nearly the whole mess to the ground. King William IV offered the newly completed Buckingham Palace, which he did not care for, to Parliament. But they didn't savor the idea.
Also, why the fuck are you subscribed to me to begin with? And now you're like, oh my god.
Other fresh sites were considered for a brand new.
You lost a subscriber. It's like when people are like, I was a fan of you, and now I'm not because you were rude one time. Like, shut the fuck up. You don't matter that much. To the point of your one thing is like, oh my god, my career is over. Someone should like die. Someone died. The fuck?
I'm always curious about who my own ancestors might have been during the historic events I write about. So I built a #1 family history service in Europe and puts over 18 billion historical records at your fingertips. I did
Anyway.
genealogical research on my family 15 years ago.
I'm going to
before I
leave
knew
now
about my
because I have to go
heritage.
feed
And while it was
myself
fun,
and
it
wait
took
for.
time to get
Goodbye.
my ancestors
Goodbye,
way.
my friend,
On
my
my
with the
heritage, I entered
friends.
in a
I
few
love you
generations
all,
of my
unless you
family,
try to
and
act
right
like you
away
are
I
better
got a
than me,
ton of
and
younger
or try to
matches.
shove your
These
subscribe
had even
in
more
my
info
face,
than I
because
had
that's very
before,
childish.
and made it
And
easy to add
honestly,
new generations to my
what the
tree.
fuck is wrong
Let's
with you?
check
I will
out
get
my
5 more
heritage
every time you
photo
unsubscribe,
pages
you
and a few
dumbass.
old pictures I have. Wow,
Bye bye, my
this
with the
colorization
friends.
is
Bye bye, my with the
amazing.
friends.
I'm going to
Bye.
frame
Bye.
this
This will be
colorized
added to
photo
the
of my
playlist
grandmother with
of
my
other
parents in
videos.
1942 and give it to her for her birthday.
Bye,
She's
my
going
with the
to
friends. Bye.
sign
Bye.
up for a 14-day free trial.